But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
What?
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor.
What difference at this point does it make?
Doesn't make sense.
If you're looking to make sense out of what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on Internet radio. And you can join the show and let your voice be heard by dialing 917-889-3675. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Friends, the entire world is experiencing food shortages. Supply chain breakdowns continue to have a domino effect on everything, especially food production. Farmers can't plant as many crops now because of fertilizer shortages, forced regulations, and of course, high fuel prices. This will cause more painful food shortages when we run out of the food we're eating now. You know, food takes time to grow. So when farmers don't plant, well, months later, we don't eat. That's why you need to prepare for an increasing number of food shortages. And the best way is to invest in Ready Hour emergency food from My Patriot Supply. It's a perfect hedge against skyrocketing prices and shortages. Right now, save $50 on a 4-week food kit from My Patriot Supply. Go to preparewithSouthernSense.com and get your $50 savings on a 4-week emergency food kits that average over 2,000 calories per day. That's preparewithSouthernSense.com. Those who know what's coming are getting prepared now. Well, if you don't want to type in that whole big thing saying preparewithSouthernSense.com and you're on my website, which is Southern Sense, put a dash in the middle, Southern-Sense, as in commonsense.com, you can easily click on My Patriot Supply and go directly to the website and get your $50 savings. As I'm telling you now, those who know what's coming are getting prepared right now. And shouldn't you? Prepare with Southern-Sense.com. That's Southern-Sense.com. Click on My Patriot Supply. Do it now. All right, and welcome back to another adventure here on Southern Sense, live on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, Lone Star Daily News, Global Patriot Nation, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeart, Facebook, YouTube. Oh, the heck with it. I don't even know where I am anymore. Just go to the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, Southern-Sense.com. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie. And my guest co-host is the one, the only, the most infamous anti-AOC person in the world. Former Congressman out of the great state of Florida, Ted Yoho. Good afternoon, Ted. How are you, Ted?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me on, Annie. You do a great job, and I know your listeners appreciate you, and they look forward to getting to the message, especially today's show. You've got a great lineup as always. So.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of great friends to join us. We've got a new guest coming on, J.B. Fred Eberlein. He's got a new book out called 90 Degree Turn, Remaking Federal Government as If, From Big, Bulky, and Misguided to Lean, Decentralized, and Relevant. If only this is a dream come true. And this is the weekend of our 9/11 anniversary. 21 years ago, this Sunday, our nation was attacked in the worst and most horrific manner by Muslim terrorists. So 9/11 is this Sunday. We are going to have Vice President to Tunnel to Towers Foundation, Kristie Kierrnan Bouryal. She's also the author of the Discovering Heroes series, which you can get up on Tunnel to Towers. And we are going to close off the show with our guest from the Heritage Foundation, returning, Sarah Parshall Perry. She's the Senior Legal Fellow for the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Say that 3 times fast with your mouth full. I bet you can't do it. Anyway.
That's right, and that's a great organization.
Yes, yes. And I have to say that when my husband passed away, I put down in lieu of flowers to make donations to T2T.org. And a lot of people did step up to the plate and make those donations. And I want to thank everyone. I know it's been over a year, but I have said thank you to every last person who made the donation, because they were so nice, T2T, to send me the list. And in case I didn't have the address to personally send a thank you card. So yes, I deeply appreciate it. It's a charity that comes very, very close to my heart. I lost 3 friends that day. Of the 72 law enforcement officers that perished in the towers that day rescuing people, 3 were friends of mine. But today is today, and now we move on and move forward. So we've got a lot to talk about today, Ted. A lot that's happening out there, from crazy, creepy Uncle Joe's speech. I'm going to get banned on YouTube again.
Yeah, really. But I tell you what, that speech needs to be talked about in depth. That was a scary speech.
Oh, yes, it was. Very, very scary. Talk about, on one hand, when he became president in his inaugural, he was talked about uniting this nation to make it great and wonderful, blah, 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 blah. And then the most divisive, the most hateful speech I have ever heard. I don't think the Ku Klux Klan could have gotten any worse than he did. And that's saying a lot, and I'm probably going to get banned on YouTube again. So anyone wondering, last week's show got taken down off of YouTube. Thank you very much. I'm famous. I'm somebody. I get banned on YouTube. Oh, man. You just can't make these things up. You really, really can't. Oh, man. But that said, Ted...
No, you can't. You really can't.
No.
Go ahead.
But that said... so we move forward along. People know that every single show, Ted, we start off with a dedication to a fallen hero. And sometimes there's situations where you can't do it to just one individual. You have to do it for all. And since this is the weekend of 9/11, the dedication is going to go out to the 9/11 in memory of those who perished and those who fought to save the lives. And this is from IJR.com, and it's titled, A Survivor of 9/11 Remembers What Happened the Day of the Attacks. And it reads, a survivor of the September 11 attacks is speaking out about what he remembers that day. 21 years ago, David Pavinetti worked for a large bank at the time that was based out of North Carolina. He was sitting in a meeting on the 81st floor of the World Trade Center's North Tower when he felt the room shake. Pavinetti told Fox News Digital that he assumed it was an earthquake because the buildings shifted one way and then back the other, then it started to shake. I started to go under the table because I didn't want the light to fall on me, but everyone rapidly started exiting the room, he said. Pavinetti said he remembers hearing someone yell, "A plane hit the building," as people were going to the stairs. In their stairwell, there were not a lot of people coming from upstairs. tells you what was going on a few flights up, he said. He said he got down to the 70th floor. The narrow stairwell was congested, and he remembers how eerily quiet the atmosphere was. Not as many people were talking. Then, on his two-way pager, Paventi got the news that a plane had hit the tower, and shortly after, he was also told that a second plane had hit the South Tower in an apparent terrorist attack. A couple of times we'd sit there, and we'd look at each other thinking, should we try another stairwell? Paventi said about devising a plan to escape the building with his co-workers. He explained they decided to stay at the stairwell when they saw that it was moving. There was one point when everyone got over so the firemen could run up. Here we were all trying to get out, and all these guys coming up in full gear carrying hoses. I couldn't imagine running up to this fire, running upstairs and knowing you still had 40 to 50 flights to go, he said. Paventi said when he finally was able to reach the lobby, all the lights were out, which caused the emergency lights to come on. There was also water on the floor. Looking outside, it looked like a scene from Die Hard. Windows were blown out. There was glass everywhere, he explained. As he exited to the courtyard, he heard people yelling at him, "Don't look, just run." We started running uptown, and I remember looking up and watched as the first tower just dropped in on itself. My co-worker had just gotten a hold of his wife, and the last thing she heard from him was, "Holy shh," before the phone cut out, he said. Paventi and his co-worker were able to make it out safely. He then decided to hitchhike to his co-worker's brother's home on Long Island. Paventi was also able to get a rental car to return to North Carolina the next day. 21 years later, there has been an effort to make sure that the future generations don't forget that historic day. Frank Siller lost his brother Stephen, a New York City firefighter in the Twin Tower attacks on 9/11, and he is now the CEO of Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Siller told Fox and Friends that the first mission of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and why they started is to make sure that we never forget what happened that day and to honor the heroes. He has announced that the foundation has now a 9/11 Institute, where they created a curriculum which will be available in all 50 states to make sure that our next generation will be taught what happened that day. The article is written by Rebecca Gazelle. And this is something I wrote on September 11th, 2015, 7 years ago. I revised it last night with the least amount of edits possible. And I wrote, Sunday, a new generation will watch as millions of Americans pause at 10 a.m. to remember 21 years ago today, the worst attack on American shores since Pearl Harbor in 1941. Some will understand and give respect to the ceremonies. Many others will rush through their workday as if it was just another day. Then there will be those of us who will pause in silence, in prayer, in remembrance of those we lost and the innocents forever gone. We were warned many times and we failed to listen. Planes were hijacked and Americans singled out. The Achille Laurel cruise liner was hijacked and Adam Klinghoffer, a disabled wheelchair-bound American, was executed. The Iranian Revolution and over 400 days of American hostages with an American colonel executed, and we still did not listen. The German disco targeted because American service men and women danced there. Americans died, we cried, and no one listened. The Khobar Tower, the USS Cole, the Kenyan Embassy, and the Twin Tower bombings in February of 1993, and so many other attacks. And still,
We did not listen. No one would speak the words Islamic terrorism. No one would admit that another nation or group would be so bold to attack the United States of America. The signs were all there. The voices were shouting the warnings here at home and abroad. How could our leaders be so blind? We elected them, trusting in their judgment to keep us safe. But they didn't have all the best intentions for their fellow Americans and the nation. We thought so. We believed self-interest and power struggles would not trump our national interest. We were wrong. On Tuesday, September 11, 2001, like many other Americans, my husband and I awoke to a bright, sunny day without a major care in the world, living our daily lives. Within a short time, with eyes glued to the TV, we watched our world forever turn upside down. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, a reporter was doing a fluff piece of what I'll never remember, and a shadow in the shape of a jetliner flew low and what looked like behind the back of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Where did the plane go? It never appeared on the other side. Why? Speculation from TV talking heads abounded across the screen. Was it a private plane with engine trouble? Reports of a plane strike began to ripple across the news report, and we sat glued to the couch. As news crews zoomed in on the Twin Towers, at 9:06 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, a second plane soared into the screen and like a missile struck the South Tower. An image forever seared into the mind of Americans and billions worldwide. While the world watched, many in horror and our enemies in glee, and the events unfolded at the towers, at 9:37 in Washington, D.C., another passenger liner flew into the Pentagon. Is America under attack? Those were the reporters and commentators' questions. Really? After the second plane, you need to ask that? Then a fourth plane was reported missing and off the radar, and we soon learned it crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. 5 hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the north facade of the World Trade Center's North Tower, 1 WTC. Another 5 hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into the south facade of the South Tower, 2 WC. 5 hijackers flew American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. A fourth flight, United Airlines Flight 93, under the control of 4 hijackers, crashed near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh. 93 cockpit voice recorder revealed crew and passengers tried to seize control of the plane from the hijackers after learning through phone calls that flights 11, 77, and 175 had been crashed into buildings that morning. Once it became evident to the hijackers that the passengers might regain control of the plane, the hijackers rolled the plane and intentionally crashed it. The attacks resulted in the deaths of 2,996 people, including the 19 hijackers. The 2,977 victims included 246 on the 4 planes, from which there were no survivors, 2,606 in the World Trade Center and in the surrounding area, 125 in the Pentagon. Nearly all of those who perished were civilians, with the exception of 72 law enforcement officers, 343 firefighters, and 55 military personnel who died in the attacks. After New York, New Jersey lost the most state citizens, with the city of Hoboken having the most citizens that died in the attacks. More than 90 countries lost citizens on the September 11th attacks. It took over 4 decades of coordinated attacks, which culminated on 9/11/2001, with an additional 2,996 deaths, to finally name our enemy Islamic terrorists. Today, Men and women who responded to the scenes as either first responders, rescuers, and in recovery efforts are dying as results of injuries or exposure to toxic elements. The death toll continues to rise as a result of Islamic terrorists. Since 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 first responders and military men and women totaling somewhere around 7,000 have passed. Let us not disgrace their memories or their surviving families, friends, and comrades by forgetting. Today, let us stand strong and shout out, "Never again." Let our voices rise loud and strong, not across just our nation or the hallowed fields of our heroes or halls of power, but across the globe. We do not forget, and justice will prevail. Let their lives be not in vain as we fuel the fire of righteousness. God bless America. Long may she stand proud and strong in freedom and liberty. Let us remember.
Annie, that was well said, and the passion was, you could feel it over the airwaves.
Thank you. I will close out the dedication with a song by my friend Todd Allen Harrington, he wrote this specifically in remembrance of 9/11. It is "My Name is America." We dedicate the show to all of the men and women that serve as first responders, be they law enforcement, firefighters, or emergency services. And we dedicate it to the brave men and women that serve this nation from its magnificent birth through today and into our hopeful future. May God bless each and every one.
Born in the grip of oppression, I fought for my liberty. I paid with the blood of my people. Freedom has never been free. Now my door's always open to dreamers and friends. When I'm attacked, I protect and defend, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll get stronger, and I'll rise up from the flames, and I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. America is my name. My strength was not taken from others. Others gave it to me. They believe in the virtues I stand for, my respect for humanity. Now I'm challenged by tyrants who envy my power, but their vicious deeds become my finest hour, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll be stronger, America is my name. For those who need me, I'll always be here. For those who will harm me, I'll face without fear. But I'll always stay proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. I'm America, yes, America is my name. Is my
All right, and we're back. You're here listening live to Southern Sounds on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media Global.
Hello.
Hi. Hang on a second.
Hello.
Fred. Hi, Fred. Just a second.
Yeah, hi, this is Fred.
Yeah, just a second, Fred. Let me finish my spiel. Up on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube, iHeart, Facebook. Oh, heck with it. I just got blown out of the water. Just go to the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. We're live currently up on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and also on our homepage, which is Southern Sense. Put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the mostest or the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, with my guest co-host, the one, the only, the infamous Congressman Ted Yoho from Florida. Good afternoon, Ted. I've lost my mind.
Good afternoon. Great to be on, Annie. Thanks. That was a great tribute you did, and look forward to talking to Mr. Everling.
Yes, we have with us the author of a new book out, 90-Degree Turn, Remaking Federal Government from Big, Bulky, and Misguided to Lean, Decentralized, and Relevant. Fred Eberlein, how are you doing, Fred?
Very good. Sorry for my
Jump the
coming
gun.
on as I did. But thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it is.
You could tell I'm not too skilled in this art.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I've had to train quite a few people. You're next in line.
Well, yeah, well, we learn best through embarrassment, don't we?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. The more we embarrass
I heard
you,
you got to be.
Yeah, I'm really
You got to
good
be
at
willing
that,
to be bad.
Yeah,
Got to be willing to be
definitely.
bad before you can be good.
Isn't that a
suppose.
song? I think it is.
I don't know.
It should be.
Man, you wrote an excellent book about how we can turn our federal government around and involving state and local. And right after I finished the very last chapter and I finished my notes on your interview today, I turned around and someone in my Tea Party had sent me a video of a county council committee meeting. And boy, I just, my head exploded. My head exploded. County council, when they see me sitting there, they go, oh shit, what are we in for now? Oh boy, I'm already got my guns locked and loaded. And I was thinking about a lot of what you wrote in your book, and you come at it from an interesting perspective because you were one of those, and I'm not going to call you a parasite, but you were one of the many that just sucked out of the government our taxpayer funds for some cockamamie things. Tell us about your program.
I
I'm
was
sorry,
a
your background.
parasite, by the way.
Well, I didn't want to say it to your face, but I will now. Tell us about your background and how you came to have this epiphany on how to revolutionize our government.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I went to Washington, D.C. in 1975 to go to American University to get a master's degree. I wanted to go into the Foreign Service. My parents had taken me to Europe in 71. I was thrilled. I was bit by the bug, if you will. Went back during my junior year, studied at the University of Vienna, and really was thrilled by it. And came back to America, finished my undergraduate studies, and was looking forward to getting into the Foreign Service, whether that was the Department of State or CIA or other agencies. So I went to D.C. with that purpose in mind, and very early in my program, I was introduced to a philosophy that really just kind of blew my mind. Now, this is obviously 1975, but what they were professing very clearly, very openly, very simple to comprehend, there was nothing opaque about it, was to how to spend money, that was the key to being in the federal government, was spending money. Don't solve the problem, make it bigger. And I relay that story in the book, right? So this is what was being taught, and to me, it's just like, no, I don't get that. You mean government's not about being efficient and getting things done? So I did not pursue my graduate studies much further, and instead I became a salesman. And I went to work for a tech company at the time by the name of Control Data Corporation, a fantastic company, no longer with us, out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, though. 60,000 people in 1980, a pioneer in disk drive storage technology. But anyway, I went with them to work on selling what we called cybernet or time-sharing services. Do you remember any of that, or you're probably too young?
Actually, I learned on key punch machines.
I remember it.
I learned on key punch.
So yeah. Okay, good. Good for you. So
Just dated myself.
So this is what brought me. That was my entree into the federal government. And then I was in D.C. for about 15 years, I think, and moved to Europe in support of the U.S. Army Europe when we were right-sizing after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that was in 91, 92. And that was really an interesting program. The only time I've seen our government right-size anything, frankly, and I was happy to be part of it. So anyway, this has always stayed with me. And a few years ago, I was reading Startup Nation Israel, and they told the story in the book about the epiphany that took place at Intel. And Intel's R&D facility in Tel Aviv, Israel, was trying to communicate to the guys in headquarters in, I think, Cupertino, California, with Intel, that they had an architectural issue, that they needed to change the thinking in the processor to overcome heat, essentially. And so the Israelis had a solution. And the guys in California just wanted to keep going down the same path of megahertz. But that was a problem. And the Israelis understood it before their colleagues in California. But eventually they came around, California did, and Intel got on a new path. That was the 90-degree turn, what they called the right turn, quote unquote. And Intel became called the right turn to make this radical change in their thinking and the architecture. And it allowed them to survive. There's a lot of competition today in their space, but it allowed them to survive. The result of that story, by the way, was the Pentium chip, which you may recall.
Yeah, wow. a lot of computers still have them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this story kind of stayed with me, and then came the lockdown, and I had time to dig deep into it and start asking questions like, how big is the federal government? I was shocked to see we really don't know. How many laws do we have? We don't know. We really don't. I mean, and if you read the reports that go into defining the government, written by the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Personnel Management, they're beautiful documents if you have a love of overhead and waste and bureaucracy. A lot of pages that say nothing. And this is the federal government. And I don't blame anybody. It's not a political thing. It's human nature. It's what happens when you're 233 years old and there's never been a curation process. So how many people do we have? We don't really know. It's a huge figure. It's 30% of the GDP now is Washington. So we can say all we want. We're not socialists. We are. And we've got a socialist problem. We need to undo it. Well, same question with laws. How many laws do we have? We don't know that either. as
No.
reported by the National Archives. Isn't that a bit scary?
Yeah, well,
It is. It's real scary.
it is real scary because if
Yeah.
you're out there in the real world, real investors really have, they look at where their money is, how it's spent, and what the value of their dollar is. And this is something you talk about in your book. Our government doesn't
Yeah.
do that. They don't look at where
No.
the dollars are going, how they're spent, and what the value in return is. What is the benefit to the taxpayer?
Correct.
And this is something you talk about
Yeah.
throughout your book.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, the U.S. government's the worst, but the European Union is similar in that regard. So they see themselves as a spout of, just spewing money out in all directions. And, it's never a good idea. There are a lot of people out there, as we know, nefarious dealers waiting for opportunities like we present to them. It's like living in a neighborhood. Yeah, and we should just not be so stupid about it. But we let a lot of things get in our way, and complexity is what I talk about in the book. So we have age, complexity, size. It's a massive bureaucracy, and the crux of it all is fundraising centric politics. I must put the majority of the onus on Congress because
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that.
Well, I don't blame a party. I think I'm sick and tired of all the finger pointing. I want to get on with the business of America. And we can do this. We just focus on the issues. We can do this. This is a pivot. I'm applying what I've seen in tech and other industries. I'm no genius on this. I'm happy for people to come and criticize it, put up another iteration. But we can dismantle this thing and make it good for the country and get back on track and, fix the deficit too.
Well, you talk about, you named the book, The 90-Degree Turn. But what is it? What's the theory? What's the principle behind this? And why 90 degrees?
Right.
Why not 180? Why not 360?
Well, again, some parts of it are 180. Again, maybe I didn't make the connection. It goes back to the story of Intel. They called it Right Turn. I didn't want to call the book Right Turn because it's apolitical. So the 90-degree turn is my take on that Intel story, right? So that's where it came from. Now, the principles, I would say, are in business and they're in tech. I've been in tech. We love lean. I mean, when I went back and looked at detail of the report from the Inspector General's Office of Health and Human Services for the implementation of healthcare.gov, and that was, I think, August of 2014, $1.7 billion for a website. That is obscene. The title of that project, it's in my book, 60 Contractors. We never do that in tech. Nothing starts with 60 contractors. Look at Google, 2 guys. That's where success begins, with a small team, right? Mm-hmm. That, work with a kernel of something, develop it, iterate on it, put it out, so on and so forth. That's what we have learned. The Founding Fathers, by the way, didn't have the benefit of that insight that we have today.
Well, you write in your book, and I've got about 48 pages of highlights here. So it tells you I read the book cover to cover.
All right, I should shut up and let you ask. Go ahead, you talk.
Well, you wrote here towards the beginning of the book, you wrote, not just wasteful. The federal government's spending habits set the stage for bad outcomes and negative returns to taxpayers.
Absolutely.
Chief among these is misguided war. Thousands of companies, big and small, depend upon defense spending. At $732 billion annually, defense is the biggest slice of the U.S. economy. It's 3 times China's and over 11 times Russia's military spend. Why now is everything centered on defense, and yet at the same time they tell us they're paring down defense? Oh, no, they're making it woke.
I don't know. I don't know enough about woke. I'm not trying to be. First, your first point is a really very important point, by the way, which is, to me, that's not the spend. The spend is bad. The spend is disgusting. It's very risky, particularly if we lose world reserve currency. But the bigger problem is the bad habit that comes from having a lot of money, right? I mean, honestly, look at people that won the lottery. Invariably, they end up in a very dark place because they had such an excess of money. There was no care. It was abandoned. Common sense went out the window. So that's our government. And so when I see us behaving in a reckless, wasteful way, it's often a result of just excess. If we had less, I talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my argument, my perspective is that Kennedy and his team, they didn't have a slam dunk. It was scary. I remember I was in school then, in a town in New York where there was an arsenal, where I am now, by the way, ward of Belief. But the point I make there is, you can say what you might about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but they had to think smart. And they did. They cherry-picked. Yeah, they cherry-picked what Khrushchev was sending across. Khrushchev, had various communications, the second of which was really a bad one, scared the hell out of Kennedy, and one of his advisors said, just pretend you never got it. That was some of the best diplomatic advice in modern history. But in any event, thinking about it, sometimes doing nothing is the best approach. But I'm getting off track. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Because
Annie, can I jump in here?
Oh, absolutely, Ted. Jump in anytime.
Fred, is it okay to call you Fred?
Please. That's my name, Jed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I served in Congress for 8 years, and I came from the private sector, and it just shocked me what I saw up there. I was on the Ag Committee and Foreign Affairs, and on the Ag Committee, I learned that the USDA spent $1.6 billion to revamp its software. The project was never finished, and it goes back to what you said. They hired 60 programmers, and nobody can make a decision. Everything's got to be done by committee. And it just was a tremendous waste of time. That's example one. The food stamp program, you're talking about no accountability, which is really funny because politicians will say accountability and transparency. They all want it. They all know we need it, but they'll never do anything to get it. The food stamp program, we showed there was at least $1 billion in fraud. And then we got pushing the people that were in charge of that program. They said, we can admit there's probably $1 billion in fraud, but closer to between $4 and $7 billion, billion with a B. And do you think you could get anybody to move on that? Not one. Another example is we gave back money every year out of our members' reimbursement account, the MRA. And I prided myself in the 8 years we were there. We gave back close to $2 million out of our operating budget because I operated it like our business. We did more with less. And one of the chairmen of one of the committees, when he found out I was doing that, he says, and he was a Republican, and he says, Ted, I wish you wouldn't do that because it makes the rest of us look bad. You're supposed to spend all that money. And I told him, it's not my money to spend. And he goes, well, you know, that money will go back to Nancy Pelosi right now. And I said, well, it's kind of like church. You know, my job is to tithe. What the minister does with it is between him and God. And the last thing that I want to just bring up here real quickly, I got a good friend that's in the service, and they rent this building. It's 2,000 square feet. This branch of the service has been renting it for over 20 years, so they don't own it. 2,000 square feet. They were authorized to remodel that building, new furniture and all that. The budget was $1 million, $1 million for a 2,000 square foot building that they have rented for over 20 years. So this person was tasked with getting new furniture, desks, couches, chairs, you know, things like that. And they just priced everything and kind of went to the max that they could spend. and they couldn't spend over $50,000, and they were trying to, and their budget was $250,000. And so they report this back to leadership, and they said, we don't want to hear about it. Just spend it. And that's the problem, because it's not their money. It's my money. And that needs to be brought to the American people. And so I want to hear how I haven't finished reading your book. I want to hear how you say we should. What is your solution? How do we get, like you said, we don't want to talk about it. The rhetoric is long on the pages. We need action.
Very good question. Thank you very much. So, very good question. First of all, going back to your story, are you familiar, or did you come across cost plus fixed fee contracts when you were in Washington? Because that's
good.
Okay. So, that's a recipe for milking the government. This is what Halliburton did in Iraq. When they're incentivized to burn a truck just to buy a new one because they get 7% of the highest price, they drive prices up, just like you described. When it came to leasing cars for the military personnel in Iraq, they went lease because they made more money that way. Last thing they cared about was the American people. Last thing. There's a report. There's billions of dollars that went to Halliburton. Nothing has happened. So I don't know. In the book too, Annie, maybe you remember this: the $125 billion in the Pentagon.
Oh yes,
that was swept under the carpet.
The report that came out, they ignored the report. They swept it under the carpet, and they had the method in which to cut it and save that money, and they completely ignored it.
Yep. So by a mistake, somehow an audit was done for, God for heaven's sakes, for trying to show areas of where efficiency could be introduced in the Pentagon, and without major changes, without termination, without anything that would have risked the country or national security, they ignored this, buried the report, and then the Washington Post found it, of course. Eventually, that's the article I referred to.
Right.
But so the problem is really at the core, I think, is that the government is about spending money and doing so recklessly. And I put the full onus for this at this point in time. Come back to your question, Ted, is that the control over money should be taken away from Congress and returned to the state, at least for now. So that's one of the harsh remedies I'm putting forward, because we went from $5.6 trillion as a national debt in 210 years. I think I say 200 in the book. It's an error. 210 years from 1789 to 1999. And since that period, we've racked up 25 trillion more. Something is wrong in the last 20 years. And I think we have to act quickly. And I just think it's clear, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Congress does not give a damn. And maybe they can't control it. I just don't know. It could be they can't control it. Politics is out of control.
Well, that's part of it. But you said something else. It's the cycle of raising money. Politicians, they worry about their next election. And so they're out there raising millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
Statesmen worry about their next generations. And, you are so right on that. And I sat in a budget meeting when Diane Black was the interim budget chair. And are you familiar with the Pac-Man chart on our debt? Back in 1964.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
1964,
that I don't know.
70%.
Thank you.
Okay, good. 70% of our cost of running government, or 70% of our income for a nation, 70% was discretionary funding. So if you look back in those eras, you could do an interstate highway like Eisenhower did, or you could do a space program like John Kennedy did, and the discretionary was roughly 30%. The inverse of that is true. Actually, today, over 70% is mandatory spending, and that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, retirement programs, interest on our debt. And then we're right at a little bit under 30% is discretionary. That discretionary, and this will blow people away, and I did this to Diane Black, that discretionary funds all of government. That discretionary funds all of the military. So your Department of Health, Education, all those. And you take the uptick in interest just since in the last 2 years, a 1% increase on $30 trillion in interest is $300 billion. And if you add that to what we were already paying, and you go up another click, we're paying more for our interest on our national debt than we are on our military. And I said to Diane Black, the Pac-Man part of this is it's going to consume us as a nation. And she looked at me, and Diane's a great lady. She looked at me, she goes, yeah, I understand, but we're not going to do it. We can't do anything. And it's in
when did you say that, if I may? When was that?
It was probably in 2015, 16.
All right. Well, you're spot on with that whole argument. I couldn't agree more.
It's grab them and shake them.
In the book, I talk about modern monetary theory. That was actually some guidance from my younger brother, Bobby, who gave me a lot of his feedback. And he knows a lot about finance and economics, et cetera, much more than I do. But anyway, point here that we make in the book is that debt is okay, provided it's for a good reason. So Amazon had a lot of debt when they were building up the company, paid back them and investors alike. So we're okay with debt and discretionary and this and that and the other. It's how we how we spend it. So my analysis says that for every $1 today that is spent by our federal government, we get less than half a penny of value in return.
I saw that in your book.
Yeah. That's
amazing. Amazingly
Put another, that's what I call the value gap. I did an analysis. I didn't just look at, I use the healthcare.gov because there's a lot of data on it, and I know that arena fairly well because I'm from tech. I had a healthcare site of my own. In fact, I talk about the grant. I think, Annie, you were alluding to that earlier, the grant I had from NIH for $250,000. Mm-hmm. And in the course of a year, nobody from NIH asked what we were doing. They never asked for a demo. Not a thing. Well, they did. No, they asked one thing. They wanted to know if there was any complaints of sexual harassment on the job, on our project. And I told them there weren't any. I'm sorry to disappoint you. We haven't had any. That was it. No, seriously, I called our project manager. I said, I like what we're doing. I like to, we talked at those days about translational medicine, bringing it out to the field, right? So I was anxious to do that. No interest. They were on to more spending. That's what the government does. That's why we see these problems, because they're in the habit of spending money. There is no accounting for it. So, maybe you could get away with that when times were good. But guess what?
Right,
right. They have passed us. So we have to wake up. So I say rule not now. I'm interested for your reaction since you were in Congress, but I know the states aren't perfect, but the states are 50. We're decentralized. So one aspect of my theory, going back to Annie's earlier question, is being decentralized.
Exactly.
And so I think we should decentralize. That doesn't mean we do away with Congress. Congress has a place. But when we do that decentralization, we put a huge hole in fundraising-centric politics. And
I agree with that. I think that's a smart thing to do.
Out. I'm glad to hear that. Delighted to hear. Please advance my book to all of your former colleagues and others. But this is what I'm outlining and recommending we do. That's the pivot.
I'll do that. In fact, I'm meeting with Dave Bratt in about 3 weeks, and he's the dean of Liberty University, and he served with me for 2 Congresses. But But your brother was very astute, because I told that to John Boehner when he was the speaker, when he was saying we have to raise the debt ceiling. I said, no, we don't. And he said, well, we're going to default. And I said, well, not raising the debt ceiling does not automatically trigger a default. Of course, I got tore up in the media. And I said what your brother said. I said, debt can be good or bad. If you're using debt to build your business, investing in it, for the return, it's good. But if you're paying your debt to live on, that's very bad. And I use the analogy of the donut spare tire in your back car, or in the car when you get a flat. You put that little donut. It's a temporary donut. It's a temporary tire. And I said, our nation has 4 of those on it, and we're driving around like everything's fine. And he just didn't get it. But you're talking about the devolution or decentralizing government. I use that argument on food stamps. We need to decentralize or a devolution of the federal government and put back to the states, which they should be doing, and get away from the federal government, which they should not be doing. And if you look at food stamps, and my wife and I were recipients of food stamps for about 6 weeks right after we got married back in 75. I was 19. And so I know the importance of that program, but on a federal program, it's like a black box. Everybody said, well, it's the government's money. It's, they're giving us this money. It's their money. And I think in my state of Florida, if we put the onus on Governor DeSantis that says you need to take care of your people in your state, they shouldn't go hungry. Therefore, do you think he'll pay more attention to jobs program, getting people back into work, instead of just saying, well, the federal government's going to take care of it? And so that would increase the accountability, and it would push that to the state like you're recommending.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, the idea here, this thing I call the needs monitor, is basically the tool, online, secure, and open source, that every citizen has access to record what they need. It's a bit more structured than what I just described, but fundamentally that's the idea. So we try to align that with government, whether that's your town or your county or your state or even regional. Think at a regional level when we think about water and things like that. So the idea is to accumulate these things, organize them in a structured way, and then understand what people really need. And we should take a lot of politics out of politics. I mean,
that would be great.
It's great to honor the country and wave the flag and love your state and root for your team, but too much of that enters into what really should be a rational bottom-up process with minimal overhead and waste. I don't expect government ever to be as efficient as private industry, but half as efficient. That should be our goal. Today, we've got 95.5% overhead.
Well, we got the Ted and Fred show here. Annie's sitting in the background.
Sorry, Annie.
No, you crossed over so many different things that I had questions on. Going back, I had started to mention about the majority of the budget being with defense, and you devote a large portion of your book to defense in the military. And you're saying that there's a huge industry that is sucking on the tit of government, no other way to put it, that's all centered around defense. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, which is also fueling wars. And you put down that, Vietnam was not necessary, that over 70% of it was just to save face, where the rest was to actually save us from communism and from China or whatever it is, North Korea taking over South Vietnam being overrun by the Chinese or North Envy. Only 30%, but 70% just went into making it look like we're really doing something. Now, I will make a personal observation because my first husband was a Marine, and up above him was the battalion, and he tried to get me a job in there. And when I went to talk to them about that, I was told basically, don't rock the boat. Whatever you do, if you find a better way to do something, don't tell us about it. Don't do it. Don't tell us
Yeah.
about it. Just get your paycheck and push the papers the way we tell you to push it. And
Oh,
I'm sorry.
oh my. Yeah.
I owned businesses, I managed businesses, and that just rankled me the wrong way. I can't do that. And I basically said, I can't do
Yeah.
that. But that is the government mindset. And another thing you mentioned was about
It is.
the
Yeah.
budget surplus that you may have, say, for example, his unit at the end of the year would have so much money left over. And he was told, find a way to
Right.
spend it. Otherwise, if you turn it back in, they're going to reduce our budget by that amount of money.
Yep. That's priority one.
But isn't that a good thing if you were able to come in under budget and then proceed to do it year after year and not have to ask for additional money? That would be the ideal thing. But our government is, as my friend Mike Cutler says, bass backwards.
Well, that's at the core of what I was taught as a young man, very naive, very green, in 1975, in my first semester of graduate school in government and public administration. This was to prepare young people for a future, a lifetime in government. And they said nothing about efficiency, nothing about saving. They said, spend and spend big. That's the mantra. And I guess they succeeded. I was offended by that at some level. As an American, I was offended by that. We never lived like that in my middle-class family in upstate New York. It was just, you know, my grandmother would say, I quote her in the book, Nana, waste not, want not. I still live by that, you know. So that really appalled me. I was kind of shocked, but I just was a young person. I backed away, found a job, needed a job because I was starved. And eventually, a few years later, found myself selling to the government. And then I really saw the mechanics. And to your point, Anna, it's very well said. Many very good people in the federal government are extremely frustrated because they can't get more accomplished. So I don't want to single out civil servants and say they're all, you know, losers and just there for the paycheck. Some are, you know,
well,
parasites like I was.
Well, you point out,
but others are really.
Well, you point out in your book when you're talking about the complexity of government. Benjamin Franklin, you quote as saying, "Never confuse motion with action." And you said he must have been peering into his crystal ball and seeing the future of the federal government because you write further down. To keep the promise of the U.S. Constitution, well-functioning government is not an option. Yet due to a long history of manufactured complexity, what the federal government can accomplish in 1,000 steps can be done in 10 or 1 or maybe none.
Beautifully read. Could you read the whole book for me?
Will I get
not
paid?
during the show, I mean. Maybe.
If you pay me to do
Sure,
the audio, I'd be happy to.
you have a great voice. I love your voice. I love your voice.
Well, I've got the face for radio.
Yeah, no,
right,
that's
Ted?
thank you for no, but that shows it. No, you know what? I have to say thank you.
No,
it shows you really
set yourself short.
Yeah, don't. But no, I appreciate that you really read the book and focus on this and the other patches. It's very good. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So, so what should I say?
Well, now
was there a question?
Here comes in your needs monitor. Now, how would that exactly work? Because we're saying, all right, I want to go over, for example, I took a friend of mine over to our local social services. He was in a bit of a situation. I wanted to give him a hand, so I went with him to help him through the process. And when I looked at the complexities and the hoops he had to jump through, were that one person could have given him a very simple, straightforward answer. But instead, you got to fill out this form. You got to go over here. You can't stand in this line. You have to go over that line. You have to go through this door. Instead of saying, well, listen, these are the criteria you need to meet. All right, go down this checklist and check off everything and then come back to me and we'll get it done. But no. Now, here comes in the needs monitor. Now, is it an individual can go online and do this, or do people send it up the chain to their local council? Or What?
No. Well, the local council, it's something for everybody. That's the point. We can all look at it. We can all see. Now, of course, you can be anonymized. I don't want to have my name and my address there, but I can be Fred Eberline from, wherever in America. And, behind the scenes, we validate that that's a real person, registered at that place, whatever. But the idea is that we collect those needs and then we try to intersect those with the resources of government. And this is instrumental in the pivot, particularly when I think of Washington. So Washington has a huge amount of resources, about 10 million people altogether, and many more resources beyond that. If you look at the labs, if you look at everything they have out there, trillions of dollars in assets. Would you say that's about right, Ted, in your experience in Washington? And government?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So we shouldn't just the idea of just saying summarily cut out this agent and cut out that. I understand. It's great for rhetoric. It's, it's nice to dream about it, but it's not going to really happen without creating a lot of problems. And we should never forget that in those government agencies, there are human beings like you and me, and nobody likes to just be fired from a job. But I say give them an opportunity by letting them know what the needs of the country are and say, oh, if you work in the federal government today, there's loads of opportunities that being advertised online from the states. Throw your hat in there or team up with others or whatever. I think if we started doing this is what I call bottom-up separation, is where we identify what in Washington intersects with the needs at the bottom of everyday citizens. And that helps us to define which parts of Washington to keep and which parts to repurpose. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Now,
that makes a lot of sense.
well, Ted, this you'll find interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how would that work with the burgeoning unions we have with government federal workers, and now the growing entrance of unions of congressional aides becoming unionized? How do you counter the unions, and how do you get around them, or can you?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I know very little about unions, but one thing I'm pretty certain of, they're made up of humans like you and me, right? And Ted, so I think we have to just appeal to our human side, our better side, our American side. Let's work together. I know there's a lot of, the unions seem to be on the rise again, and maybe there's a good reason for that, but we have to work to find the common ground. If our focus is always on what we disagree about, the other or their party, we'll get nowhere. And that's pretty much proven itself out over the last 20 years.
Sure.
Well, Ted,
I think the shock of
Well, I was going to say, Ted, this would probably go right up your alley because you're more familiar with the union side of federal government, and also with now the growing movement to unionize your congressional aides. And I'd really love to see how that works, where you've got someone that was a Republican conservative having a unionized office that was formerly that of a liberal Democrat. Boy, I can see how the work will go on that office and the constituents being met by them. That's no fun. So
right.
This is
No, it's not. And unions, they can kind of be like the debt. They can be a good thing or a bad thing. And, I was in a union and I got a very sour taste for that union because they told me not to work as hard as I was working. And that came from the BA of the job, was the Carpenters Labor Union, because the other guys were complaining that I was making them look bad. But I think there has to be a way to incentivize saving money in these agencies, and I think they also have to be repurposed on their mission, because I don't think they've done that. And a lot of these agencies start temporarily, like food stamps, temporary assistance for needy families is how it started, temporary. TSA was supposed to be a temporary program, And, I don't want to argue the merits. I know we've not had another major attack, and I know a lot of that goes to them. But there has to be a way to incentivize these programs and refine them, hone them down. And I think, as you said earlier, take a lot of that to the states. If the states were in charge of food stamps in their states, there would be closer programs run by local government, state government, and the federal government could just monitor the results.
Well, that I completely agree.
Yeah.
These social programs should be state-run. Unemployment insurance, welfare, food stamps, Section 8 housing, the free Obama phones should all be state-run. It used to be that if you went for unemployment, you had to show up at the unemployment office at a specific time. And if you're not at that window, and there may be a line, which always was,
Right.
You're going to be denied your benefits for that week, or they're going to give you the Riot Act, explain why you weren't here on time, and tell me where you applied for a job.
Yeah.
Give me the references of who you spoke to. Let me prove to me that you actually went there. But now you get a check in your mail. Oh, no, wait a minute. Not even in your mailbox. It's direct deposited to your bank. It used to be welfare
Wow.
to work, or work to welfare, whatever. You used to have to say, listen, this is temporary welfare unless you're proven to be permanently disabled and can never, ever work, or the situation is where you can never, ever work. You have to do something, even if it's emptying the waste baskets at the VA hospital. That's going out the window.
Yeah. I would interject here if I'm sorry, did I interrupt? Go ahead.
No, go
Andy.
ahead. No, finish, please.
I was just going to say there's more than part of the reason why I'm advocating and in my theory saying that we should return budgetary control to the states is primarily because Washington is doing such a poor job. Okay. So it's not because I think the states are necessarily performing a lot better. It's more so because we have to do something to pull away from Congress their control over money. They've proven in 20 years, the past 20 years, they really have no control over it. And that's very dangerous ticking time bomb. I mean, as Ted, you just said, that we're paying, I think, $500 billion a year just in interest on debt now. And Congress is doing nothing to address that. So first reason for decentralizing is simply to get it out of the hands of Congress. The states, on the other hand, part of this is about them applying, let's say, proportionality to financing things. So bear in mind, in my model, and this is a bit controversial, I think all decisions, ultimately, those including defense spending, should be made at the state level. The reason for that is I think we need to start to think proportionality. We don't act proportionally today, in my humble opinion. If you look at the amount of spend on military, for example, vis-a-vis other industries, and I think that's because politics has had its effect, that has compounded over years, and we see this gap. So by returning to the state level, we also put a big hole in fundraising-centric politics as it is today. It doesn't mean that there's no more lobbyists out there. They were always going to be, as long as there's parasites in this world. We know that. But this radically changes how we do things today, and as we say, substantially. Maybe that people get scared by radical. I don't want radical to, I don't advocate revolution. It's more, how can we intelligently apply ourselves using what we know today about tech and management practices to make for a much, much better government that delivers value. So again, bringing this back to the states is getting control from Washington and then interjecting some balance and proportionality into financing, into budgetary decisions.
Well, after I watched my county council committee meeting last night, I'm wondering just how well that might even work, because even within my small neighborhood, well, it's not exactly small, but within even just my local government, I see the waste because they want to implement a green space tax. And yet we've got two agencies that work hand in hand with the county council already to handle green space.
Yeah.
And they want to form a council state partnership, which eventually the state would then take over in our local area. So I don't even trust a local government to be responsible. So how do we have it where we have basically a democracy dictating how the budget goes? Majority rule decides.
I think this is where, isn't this politics just kind of corrupting common sense? I don't know.
I think you're right on that for sure.
Yeah, I think the idea here, Annie, is to try to unwind all of those hierarchies of government we have. I'm not saying go home, everybody. It's just like we have a new metric. It's called the needs monitor. And here it is for your town. This is what people want to have done. And maybe it's environmentally, maybe it's green, maybe it's something, whatever. They can put it there. And they can offer solutions, too. The idea is not just to have people complaining and bitching, it's to let them contribute to solving the problem. Now, there are a lot of issues out there, like political ones, that I think we should just kind of let them die on the vine, if you will, and let new green shoots, rise from, I'm being poetic, sorry, but, let a new approach emerge. We have to have the will to try that. It won't be perfect. Politics will always be doing its thing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but we really should formulate a better approach, and that's what I'm attempting to do in the 90-degree turn.
All right, well, now, Ted, you've read part of the book. How would government be change in this manner? Would it be receptive, or would we find the mass media and a big pushback from entrenched politicians saying, no, we don't want to change government, we're happy the way it is? Do you see any possibility of something like this being implemented?
I think, as Fred said, politics comes into play, and I agree with whatever you just said. You're going to run into resistance on both sides. You're going to run into resistance from the agencies, and it's going to be a tough lift. But if we don't, one of those things, if you don't deal with your debt, it doesn't matter if you deal with your debt or not, because if you don't deal with it, your debt's going to deal with you as a nation, and it'll dictate the austerity measures that will come. And you can look at what's going on in Argentina right now, when over 41 or 51% of the people are getting subsidies from the government, and they're rioting in the streets because of austerity measures. And one of the interviews I saw, they asked the guy why he was rioting. He says, well, we want more from the government. We don't want to take away. And, our forefathers warned us of that.
No doubt that Congress and anybody in Congress would probably hate this theory, but that's their problem.
Well, you hit on something, if I may, Annie.
Yeah.
When you said, Fred, that if they would work on a common goal, if they would come to the realization, and I sat down with Wolf Blitzer. He and I went out to dinner to try to get him to talk. I called him up. I had our team set it up.
Maybe
we
you
went
can
to dinner
introduce
for 2 hours. Just he and I, and it was all, I'll be glad to, it was all about getting the message out about our debt, not as Republicans or Democrats, but of the tsunami that's coming at us. If we don't deal with this, that debt will deal with us. And you were talking about defense, going to the states, and I'm going to have pushed back a little bit of that, because one of the few things that the federal government is tasked for is to provide for the common defense of the nation. And if you have each state kind of deciding what they're going to do, you're organizing by committee, and that never works well.
No, I'm not advocating that. I'm not, just that's a very good point, and I just so I'm perfectly clear. I'm not advocating that the defense goes to the state. I'm advocating that this funding decisions are reasoned at the state level alongside other funding things, proportionality. So defense remains. We're a democracy. It's a crazy world. We need a strong defense. I worked with defense. I walked the halls of the Pentagon. I have a lot of respect, but they'll be the first to tell you. Look at Robert Gates, his story.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that
I read his book. I got it right here.
Yeah, and he had to do what? He had to sneak around to save money for the tax. That is ridiculous. When you see that happen, and bravo to him, but shame on the system. That's another lesson learned. I think
that is shame on the system.
Yeah, don't you think we've run out of time? I mean, it seems obvious to me, and I look at Congress as human beings first. I think if I was there with them, getting all these perks, seeing all these lobbyists, I wouldn't be any different. So I don't look at this as a political, you're this, you're that party. It's a human issue, and we should just recognize it as such. Money is the world's biggest bias. Money will get people to do a lot of crazy things. We've seen it. And that's what this is about. Money. We need to take money out. Look at campaigns are running into what was the total in 2020? Was it 14 billion?
Was it billion?
I think it was 14 billion. Yeah, it's skyrocketing. And, bear in mind, as they say in the book, a lot of that money is pharma. A lot of that money is from banks to Congress. I mean, 2/3 of Congress today, as of, I don't know, when I wrote the book and that report, last couple of years, is funded, receives funding, I should say. That was in the 2020 election from pharma. 2/3 of pharma. So, they're humans. They're just going to help pharma and look the other way.
Yeah, self-interest.
Yeah, it is. And I think we would all be that way. So I think it goes nowhere for us to argue parties any longer. The parties have both failed. To me, it's like drinking Coke and Pepsi when I want a water. We should just recognize it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong. But we should, if you stand back and look at like Ray Dalio's Changing World Order. I don't know if you're familiar. All right. Well,
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he looks at cycles over the last 500 years. We're 233 years old. That's pretty old. Right. We're starting to go down the chute of the 300-year cycle. It begins, and according to Ray, and he's gone back 500 years. He's looked at the Dutch. He's looked at the British, and he's modeled these. And it's a bit scary to see this, but he says, to his credit, we can do things to stop this, and that's exactly where I intersect with Ray Dalio. If you know, I mean, I think he has 21 million views on YouTube, so he's a very successful entrepreneur. I believe he's a billionaire, multi-billionaire. Anyhow, so I see the U.S. as being in a cycle. And I put forward my theory as a way of applying the brakes and returning us to where we should be.
Well, we sure need to. If not, those brakes are going to put the pressure on us and change however we live in this country.
Yeah. By the way, it's not just U.S. of A. It's all democratic republics. The EU has very similar problems, and given how young they are, those problems are even, one could argue, worse.
Right.
But their economy is not as big as ours. Well, almost as big now, but our waste is much greater. So I don't want to misstate this. The EU has its issues, but they're you relatively small now.
You describe the uphill battle in your book that we're going to be facing, and yet after you describe the uphill battle, you also give steps on how we can pull ourselves out, because you start off with saying the past has gotten us to where we are today. Questioning tradition and common practice cause discomfort. It's best to leave well enough alone.
Right.
We're comfortable with what we know,
Right.
even when we hate it and see it fail. Were it not for our risk-adverse shortcomings, would have radicalized Washington long ago. But then on very next page, you talk about the bottom-up separation, on simple steps on trying
Right.
to get this to work. Now, what is your bottom-up separation idea? And we're running down to our last few minutes
Right.
here.
Sure. Okay. Well, the bottom up comes from the monitor, the needs monitor. So the needs monitor, think of it as a web platform, going to a web page, maybe like some commerce pages you've been at, or not really social media, but anyway, it'll be a survey of sorts compiled in there for people to see and add to securely. It'll be open source. So that is where we put together our needs. We package them effectively into, let's say, virtual RFPs, requests for proposals. The states are familiar with this. The everyday citizens aren't so much, but it's not a great leap. It's not that complicated. And we can see these proposals, people who participated asking about clean water or better education or whatever, they can see exactly what went from whatever state or county or you were in to the state or the federal government. They can now monitor that. So that's the idea here, Annie, in terms of streamlining the federal government, to align the federal government with local needs.
Well, now, here's
when we do,
well, I was going to say, here's the kicker question, because you know there's going to be a huge pushback, and you talk about political fundraising, and there's big bucks behind that. And you talk about
we got to kill that.
You talk about in your book how the media, and we know the media is in bed with certain politicians. How do we then prevent them from controlling the conversation and controlling what the needs are?
Well, I think it all goes back to money. As I said, this is the evil, I think. I mean, I like money. I'm a capitalist, but too much is not good. And there's way too much in politics. And politicians, you know, Ted has attested, I think, right? It's all about fundraising.
Yeah. I didn't play their game, and you can do it without that, but I agree with you. There's way too much money in politics.
Yeah. That's what's corrupted it. So that's why I say, let's stop mucking around and making excuses and rationalizing. They're not going to find any issue that brings them together. Okay, there's another war or something, big deal. Look, they've been given strategic objectives from Treasury since 2013. Treasury has said, hey, guys, by the way, over the last 18 years, 14 of those years, we lost 10% or more. This was in the unemployment insurance fund, okay? Billions of dollars. What do you think Congress has done? Zero. Nothing. That to me is, wait a minute, that's the Constitution, guys. You violated it. So we got to redefine your role. But if we get down the rat hole of politics and finger pointing, you know, it's just not going to turn out well because I think it's abundantly clear. I'm no rocket scientist, but it seems to me, I don't know, I'm seeing the end of the tunnel, and there's a train coming in the other direction.
Big train.
Big train. It's time we, wake up and smell the coffee and stop making excuses. If we're Americans, then by golly, we should show it. Period.
We sure should. And John Kennedy brought us together in the space program to go to the moon, and we didn't have the computer power, but we came together as Americans to make that happen. And we need that kind of leadership to bring all Americans together and say, this is where we're going, and make those tough decisions now before they're forced on us. It's been great talking to you.
I'm just saying, let's return it. We can do it now. We can return the control to the people that wasn't there at the beginning. Is this a solution for all time, for the next millennium? I would never be so naive to say it, but it's a way of rescuing the United States of America from the impending crisis in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
I agree.
Well, it's a powerful book, very interesting.
Thank you.
A good read. I love reading books of my guests cover to cover, so I know what I'm getting myself into. But people can find you. You have a blog also, 90degreeturn.com, but the book is also up on Amazon.
That's right.
So people listening to the show in the archives can click on a 90-degree turn and go to Amazon to get your book, or go to your blog link and go onto your blog and have a conversation with you. It has been fun speaking with you, Fred, and I wish you a lot of luck on your book sales.
Thank you. I really
Thanks, Fred.
appreciate your
Great
time
talking to
and
you.
Ted's as well. Yeah, thanks for both of you. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Have a good weekend, and God bless.
Stay
the
in
hard
touch.
work. All right, we will. All right. Check out JB Fred
Bye-bye.
Eberlein at 90degreeturn.com. We have our next guest in on the show here, Ted. My guest co-host today is former Congressman out of the great Sunshine State of Florida, Ted Yoho. And I want to welcome to the show from Tunnels to Towers Foundation, Kristie, Kierrnan, and I know I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Bouryal. Did I say that correctly?
You got it. Perfect.
Oh, wow.
It's so nice to be with you.
Oh, it is
Hey,
my
Kristie,
pleasure.
great to have you on.
Yes.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I've got sitting outside flying in my flag. Normally I have the Blue Lives Matter, the Blue Lives flag sitting out front, but I switched it out this week. Always the week before 9/11, I put out my flag of heroes, and that's what's flying in my front
Thank you
yard.
for doing that.
Yeah, 3 of my friends were of the 72 that rushed in and did not come out. So I don't know if they told
Very
you.
sorry.
I don't know if they told you, but I came out of the 90 precinct just over the bridge from the Twin Towers. I retired back in
Wow.
96, but I was there in 93 when it was bombed the first time. And I just lost my co-host. He just fell off, so he'll probably call back in, hopefully. Well, if people aren't familiar with Tunnels to Towers, that was founded by Frank Silla, let people know exactly what it is. I don't know of anyone that shouldn't know what it is, but there's always someone out there that doesn't know.
Sure. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is the preeminent 9/11 foundation. And what the Tunnel to Towers Foundation does is it helps America's heroes. For $11 a month, you help America's heroes. And what the foundation does is when America's heroes don't come home, people like first responders, fallen first responders who leave young children behind, are catastrophically injured service members. We pay off mortgages of fallen first responders who leave young children behind, Gold Star families who leave young children behind, and we build for catastrophically injured service members and catastrophically injured first responders. We build smart homes to help them live more independent lives, and we are working to eradicate veteran homelessness. And now, just this week, we announced the launch of our Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute, which is working to educate children K-12 across America about 9/11 so they can never forget. We have runs and walks and climbs across America, golf outings, barbecues, all part of our Never Forget program so that people can remember America's heroes and the sacrifices they've made for all of us. People can participate and engage, remember our heroes, and that helps to fund all of our amazing programs that help to remember the sacrifices they've made for all of us.
You know, when I ever think of Tunnels to Towers, I always flash back to those that I worked with or went through the academy with and lost. And Eddie Burns is one of them. It was the first time I stood in a funeral, white gloves on, and I ended up with a bloody nose because he was in my sister class in the academy. And I can go down the list, Bob Machadi, and I can go on and on. Reggie Regimentowski, those that we've lost. And back then we had no one. You had your pension and that was it. Have a nice life. But Tunnels to Towers has come out as a premier charity foundation. And whenever someone asks me about a charity, I always refer them to the Charity Navigator. And I don't even have to do that with you guys, because right now A good charity is a charity that gives 85% back to what it's founded for. Yours is 94%, with 3% going to fundraising and 3%, a mere 3%, to running the foundation. That is a heck of a big bang for the buck for people to donate to.
It's extraordinary. We are always a 4-star rated charity, which is the highest rating you can get on Charity Navigator. And this foundation is it's so well run. The Siller family who started this foundation, it's an extraordinary family. And it was started in the name of Stephen Siller and in his memory, a firefighter who ran into the danger on 9/11 to help others, sacrificed his life to help others that day. And it's in his memory that we help so many heroes today, and in his memory and the memory of all we lost on that day. So it's extraordinary, the work that we do, but it's also the integrity of the organization. You think about the integrity of America's heroes, it carries through to everything we do, certainly how we represent ourselves financially, everything we do, it just carries through. I've never worked in an organization that's had the integrity that this one does. It's extraordinary.
It is. And I have to tell you that my husband passed away a year ago this past June. And
I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right. He's out of pain. That's the most important thing. And when people are asking, where do I send flowers, whatever, and I kept on saying, in lieu of flowers, go to t2t.org and make a donation in his name. And I got to tell you that about 2 months afterwards, the staff over there, very, very helpful. They gave me a list of everyone and how much they donated. And there's 1 or 2 people I didn't have an address for, and they were able to give that to me. And I sent out a personal thank you note to each and every person, just to say thank you for making a donation. And this is something that I encourage other people to do, that, if there is, you want to give even a Christmas gift, you make a donation to T2T and put it in the Christmas card, in your name, in your honor, I made this donation. And it's a worthy cause, because it's not only giving a gift to the person saying, I thought of you, but I thought so well of you that I thought I would put your name on this donation. And then to the person that receives the benefit of that donation, it's 2 gifts being given in one choice.
Absolutely. You can donate in honor, in memory of people. We see this for when people pass. We see this for holidays, for birthdays. You see it for a variety of different ways. We also see legacy giving, right? So we see people who say, I want my legacy to carry on. And we see people who put giving into their wills. You're able to do that on our website as well. It's really extraordinary. The generosity of people in this country is extraordinary, and it never ceases to amaze me. But there are a variety of ways to give, and it's all available on t2t.org.
Yeah. Now, I was amazed because they're branching out in the donations, because you guys are just that successful. Because now you're handling homeless veterans, you're helping them to find places. I saw that you were also helping the children in Ukraine. You have these Never Forget programs. Now, just 2 days ago, you launched the 9/11 Institute. And that is a multi-tiered thing where you break it down to different grade levels. And you were instrumental, and as I did my research, you were one of the main people that put this 9/11 Institute together. Tell us about what it is and all the different functions it does.
Oh, I am so excited about this launch. I can't even begin to tell you how thrilled I am that this has actually become reality. So this week what we announced is the launch of the 9/11 Institute, as you mentioned, and this is a multifaceted, expanded education program at Tunnel to Towers, and it has a number of different components. So it has curriculum, which I'll tell you all about, because that is just extraordinary. And what we are doing with curriculum, no one else is doing. And that's what's really exciting. And I can't wait for it to be in classrooms all over this country. We also have a Never Forget Speakers Bureau. We have where people can, educators can request speakers come into their classrooms, do assemblies in their schools. City officials can ask for people to come and speak at events across the country. We also have, if you have a 9/11 story or a part of 9/11 and you'd like to be part of our Speakers Bureau, we have a way for you to tell us your story, and we can get in touch and discuss that. We have a 9/11 Never Forget mobile exhibit. This is an 83-foot tractor trailer that opens up into a museum with artifacts about 9/11 that has been traveling the country, that we are now making a push to get that into schools, to get that to more school and educational locations. And we're also proud to announce that we're going to grant substantial financial scholarships to exemplary high school students that are the children of our program recipients. So this is really new, and what's really special about it is it's named after the Siller family patriarch, Russell F. Siller. So Russell F. Siller Memorial Scholarships. It's something we're really so proud. He's a longtime educator and no longer with us, and we're just really so proud that we're now bringing this to life in his memory. It's just such an honor to do that. So those are the components of the Institute, and we're just so delighted that now we're going to make sure kids are educated so that they can never forget, because I don't know if you know this, but after 20 years, only 2 states mandated K-12 education. That was Tennessee and Arizona. And 21 years later, only 1 state joined them, and that's New Jersey. So in this grand country of ours, only 3 states are mandating K-12 education, and that is a travesty. The good news is, though, that there are many educators that, despite mandates, they're teaching anyway. So that's the good news. Unfortunately, though, there are a lot of places where it's not being taught at all. So we need to make some ground, and we need to get this curriculum into the hands of lots of teachers across this country. And I've done a lot of listening for a long time at all the issues around 9/11 education. And what we've done with our curriculum is try to answer all of the issues that I've heard about and answer it in a way that's really comprehensive, right? So we are offering comprehensive curriculum units for K-12. So what does that mean? It means a teacher of any age and with any background can pick up a full unit. And these units have full social studies scripted lessons, right? So if you know nothing about 9/11 and you just graduated college, you could pick up one of our units and be able to use a completely scripted set of lessons. And if you have a full week, great, because we've got lessons that you can use all week. If you have a day, we could just teach one lesson. But we've made it easy so you can pick and choose depending upon how much time, depending upon your comfort level, depending upon how much background you have on it. We provided background material for the teacher just to give them more background and understanding and context so they feel more comfortable teaching about that day. And we also provided the scripted lessons, right? We have learning activities that are within the units that both reinforce educational standards and they also challenge students academically. Every unit provides that deep background, plus we have videos of first-hand accounts about 9/11, and we have, for the trilogy of books that I wrote, we have book summaries. So teachers really have background information that again, make sure that there's ease of implementation. We cover all the impacted sites because we want to make sure that kids are learning about all of that, plus the legacy of goodness and how we spread goodness today to honor all of those lives that we lost. We focus solely on true, nonfiction accounts of 9/11. And I can't tell you how important that is because there are bodies of work out there, it may surprise you to hear this, but they actually focus on fiction. They have fiction. They have fictional art. They have fictional books. And I just cannot comprehend why we would use fiction to teach kids when we have so many incredible stories out there that are real and true. So we focus on nonfiction, and that spans survivors, first responders, witnesses, government officials, family members, and our goal is to provide these different points of view on that day and its aftermath. We created engaging, emotive, first-person videos. We want kids to hear how people felt, to hear what they saw, and see the emotion on their faces as they recount their experiences from that day and the days that followed. In a couple of our units, we have 2 foundation board members who are also retired FDNY battalion chiefs that narrate a video tour of our Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Never Forget mobile exhibit while they're providing historical context about the day and what happened at 3 impacted sites. And what that does is it just brings honesty, integrity, and authenticity. It just hasn't been out there for kids to date about 9/11. It really brings the day to life for kids so they can never forget and want to learn more. So we also created all of this material so children can learn about the events of the day while they're also learning academic skills, and this is a major differentiator, okay? It's really important because we want kids learning about history while we're also setting them up for success in the future. And ensuring that future generations are college and career ready, we believe that starts in kindergarten. So just to give you a for example about what that means. Within our K-12 curriculum, kids will be learning and they'll be reading and writing. They're going to be answering questions using details that they're going to gain from multiple sources of information as well as prior knowledge. They'll be comparing events on the same day from multiple people, reading historical text. They'll be socially interacting, collaborating with their peers, speaking and listening, engaging in collaborative discussions. That will help with historical recall. We put heart and soul into 9/11 in a way that nobody's done before, and we did this in a really loving and emotive way. And I believe that this material is going to move kids in a way that's going to stay with them, not in a way that's going to traumatize them, not in a way that's going to make it hard for them to understand or be scary in any way. It's going to move them in a way that's going to stay with them, that they're going to want to learn more, and in a way that's informative, not too detailed, in a way that's really going to pull on their heartstrings and make them connect with the people and the witnesses to history that we're going to bring into their lives. So I'm really excited about what we're going to educate kids with, because I really believe that to deprive children of educating them about 9/11 is to deprive them of the world around them. 9/11 is everywhere. It's when you walk in an airport, when you turn on a TV, it's in all these television broadcasts, right? It's when you drive up to a federal building, you can't. It's everywhere. They have to learn about it so they can understand the context in the world they're living in. And we did it in a way that is age appropriate and in a way that makes it really easy for educators. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, when I was doing my research, and I have to interject here because my co-host for today, my guest co-host, dropped out a little bit and he's back on here. My guest co-host today is former Florida, a congressman out of the great state of Florida, Ted Yoho. But Ted, after 9/11, certain legislations were put into effect that the kids today don't understand what freedoms we gave up and what liberties we had, what freedom of movement, as Kristie was mentioning about. Now you go in through the airport, you have the TSA doing a pat down. You can't walk into a federal building without surrendering your cell phone and making sure you're unarmed. And so many things have changed in our life over these last 21 years because of 9/11. Ted?
No, Annie, they have. And that's the thing. And Christine, number one, I can tell you're very passionate about what you're doing, and I commend you for what you're doing, because I've been there. I think we all remember what our generation will always remember where we were on 9/11. The important thing that you're doing with your mobile 9/11 display, the educational things you're doing, is you're keeping that in current history. And we've all heard that if you don't remember your past, you're going to repeat it. And we've just got to make sure that we keep that in the forefront and never waver from that. And what Annie was talking about, you know, when I was in Congress, I would talk to a lot of high school students, and it was really interesting because we talked about, you know, how we're losing freedoms, but yet we don't know. And it's the analogy of you can cook a frog two ways. You can throw them in boiling hot water or a pot of water, or you can put them in a pot of water and turn up the heat slowly. It doesn't matter to the frog because either way he gets cooked. And when we start giving up freedoms, and I asked the students, I said, how many people have flown on a plane? Well, they have, pretty much everybody raised their hand. And then I said, how many of you remember flying before TSA? None of them knew it. And I said, it never was like that. You could go on a plane, you could do whatever you wanted to, and not ever whatever you wanted to, but you could go on there and you could go into the cockpit. And it's a small example of the liberties and freedoms that we lose. That's why what you're doing to keep this as a reminder for future generations is so important that we do that.
It's so true, Ted. And I have to tell you, too, one of the other reasons I feel like we need to keep this alive for kids and make sure they understand is because people are still dying from that day. You know, the World Trade Center Health Program has 118,000 people that are still a part of it, and 72,000 of those people have more than 2 certifications of health issues tied to that day. We're still losing people to that day. So a lot of people talk about... Yeah, we sure are, you know, and it's like, you know, we talk about our history and that day, but we're still losing people to that day. So we also make that point really clear to kids as well, and that they can't believe it when they hear it. We're still losing people. It stuns them, you know. So I you know, that's a big part of it as well. It's going to be with us for a while.
Well, I hear background noise. But anyway, Kristie, I don't know if you were aware, but I start each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And because this is 9/11 weekend, I did the dedication to the 21st anniversary of 9/11. And that was a point I made, that we are still losing people, not only from just 9/11, but from the wars that followed after it because of 9/11.
Absolutely.
So it's civilians, it's first responders, and it's also our military men and women. The toll that our nation has taken because of that day, and because we never listened to the warnings that came before. Yeah, and I'm so
absolutely. It
is amazing that people don't realize the consequences of that single day.
Yeah, or they talk about them as distinct and separate parts, right? They might talk about the military portion of it, you know, and fail to leave and fail to mention the part that we lost over 7,000 people in the war on terror, right? Or they might talk about the 2,977 people we lost on 9/11, or fail to mention the people we're still losing today, right? Or they might talk about just 9/11 illness and fail to mention the 2,977 people and the more than 7,000 people we lost in the war on terror. But it's the whole thing, right? So it's the whole picture, and it's painting that whole picture. And let's stop talking about the pieces and the parts. Let's talk about the whole picture, and let's make sure that kids are aware of this. And it's not just a day in history, it's a day that's still taking lives. And let's make sure that's really clear. And let's make sure they understand all of the things they see around them in their life, and the reasons they are the way they are is because of that day. And they're shocked to hear it and learn it when they do start to understand it. And then they start to ask the question, why did I not know this before? And I just say, let's just focus on you're learning it now, and you're going to learn a lot more as you go forward.
Well, I want
to not even focus on the reasons why you haven't learned it before. Let's just focus on going forward.
Well, I want to mention that with that the Institute, the 9/11 Institute, there's a series of children's books that a certain author, what's her name? I think it's called Discovering Heroes book series. Oh, what's the name of that author? Who is that?
That would be me. Yes. Yes, in fact, yeah, the Discovering Heroes series. There are 3 books. It's a trilogy about 9/11. And the books are a true telling of how the stories unraveled in my family. Nonfiction stories. My dad was a 9/11 first responder who was not working that day, but raced to get there when he heard what happened. And many years later, it was his grandchildren who weren't learning about it in school, and how the stories started to be told in our family. And in the first book, My Buddy's a Hero and I Didn't Even Know It, his grandchildren learned for the first time that their grandfather was a part of a group of people who helped to rescue the last man out alive from the ruins of the World Trade Center. They didn't even know it until they started asking questions at the dinner table. The second book is Remembering Heroes, and in the second book, they go to the Rescue Company 1 firehouse. It's part of the Fire Department of New York City's rescue company. Yep, a company that lost 11 men that their grandfather was a part of, and a lieutenant there. And in that book, they learn about the concept of everyday heroes. They learn more about the 11 men and the many dear friends that their grandparents lost that day. They see everyday heroes in action. They learn about the nearly 3,000 people that lost their lives. And when they see the everyday heroes in action, they see a reenactment of what happened in after 9/11 and in the days that followed, how people lined West Street to thank first responders as they left and entered Ground Zero. And they learn about how touching that was for their grandfather and for the first responders who experienced that. That was really special. You know, here are all these people who just wanted to help, and they probably thought they weren't doing much by standing on the side of a road with a sign that said, "Thank you, God bless our heroes, God bless America." And, you know, here it really restored strength in our first responders who were just stunned when they came out. And my father cries, you know, brings tears to his eyes and really makes his voice shake when he talks about it today. And here they got to see people reenacting it. To this day, they do it. They reenact it to this day. So they got to see that play out. And that's in the book, Remembering Heroes. The third book is 9/11 Courage and Tributes. And so throughout this trilogy, the kids are learning more about 9/11. And in the third book, they really want to understand even more. They're eager to learn more. And so their grandparents take them to very special places where they learn to pay tribute and honor people that were lost. And they visit many special places. They learn how people are honored. They learn that our nation's largest water evacuation took place on 9/11, and it only took place because everyday heroes answered the call for help from the U.S. Coast Guard. And, you know, they learned that 9/11 is continuing to take lives, and many people have died from 9/11 related illnesses, and they learned that their grandparents have 9/11 related health illnesses. So the trilogy is really how the stories unraveled in truth in my own life, and it's really how the 3 grandchildren, their journey of understanding and learning 9/11 through the loving words of their grandparents.
Oh, it's powerful.
And the books now are part of, the Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute, and they'll be solely distributed through the Institute. And the curriculum that we have is, we have individual curriculum units for each book, K-2 and 3 to 5 units for each book available through the Institute.
You know, a lot of people don't even know what happened the day after 9/12. How people opened up their homes, how perfect strangers gave everyone else a ride just so they can get out of the city back to their homes. My sister-in-law
Yeah.
being one of them. She was working for Merrill Lynch out of the towers. As a matter of fact, hers was disaster management. That was her job. That's why they moved over
Wow.
into New Jersey. But we couldn't find her for several days. A family just took her in and let her stay there until she was able to find a way out of the city. You know, story after story you hear about that, how people came out of the woodwork and set up food tables to feed the first responders around the clock, bringing blankets and coffee and whatever else they needed, even just a shoulder to cry on. The signs that were put
It was
up are the missing.
extraordinary.
Yes. I mean, even every single state, the people were lining up to take people in or to give blood or to send donations of food, clothing, blankets, whatever we could lay our hands on to send upwards. It was at one time, I shouldn't say Pearl Harbor, but after, it was the one time that we in modern day saw a nation come together, and it didn't matter who you were, where you came from, what your political persuasion or sexual persuasion, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered but helping.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. We came together in ways we never imagined our nation could. And we came together to help one another. And I have to say, the message that I take away, and one big message I think is a great message for kids, or if there are a couple that I'll share, is on our darkest day, goodness outshined the darkness. And I can say that goodness prevailed because that goodness carried on even today. I mean, you just look at the goodness that carries on through the foundation and others like it. We carried that goodness forward because that goodness is what gave us hope to get through that. And that goodness is always going to carry forward. So I say, the lessons from that day too is even on your worst day, you can be your best. And the people that we lost, they were their best that day. You look at the stories of heroism. They ran to the danger. They ran to help others. They could have made other choices, and they didn't. They were the best. And even in your darkest hour, you could be your best. I think those are extraordinary messages for children. And I know that we only came together, and we can say today that goodness prevailed because we came together. So as a whole, we are better than we are individually. And those are great messages for kids to learn. And I say that wholeheartedly because I lived it. And anybody who lived it, and anybody I talk to that lived it says exactly the same thing. So these are all messages that kids need to hear and need to understand, because national tragedies tend to have these themes that carry through them, right? So there will be, unfortunately, other national tragedies, and these themes carry through. But it is the banding together and the bringing together of people and helping of one another that shines light through the darkness, and that darkness carries on today. That is the legacy of 9/11. That goodness outshined the darkest day our nation experienced. These were civilians. Civilians were attacked. That had never happened on American soil, and I pray that it never happens again.
No, we pray that too. But through the Tunnel to Towers, through your 9/11 Institute, you also have something, the Student Athlete Advocates. These are Tunnel to Towers ambassadors. You're getting young kids to get the message out. Not just, the adults, the people that were there, but these are people that post on the social network, and they are ambassadors for Tunnel to Towers. Tell us about that, and what's the criteria for that?
Yeah, and they also have ties to 9/11. Many have ties to 9/11 as well. So we have, one of the great legend of the fire department of New York City was Ray Downey. This was a man who really is the reason for Special Operations Command in the fire department of New York City. He was the reason for its starting. His legacy is that his granddaughter is one of our student athletes. She's in college now, playing sports, and she now is able to be part of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and to support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and be one of our ambassadors, sharing the message of goodness and sharing the message of the foundation with her peers and people who follow her, and be able to share her story and her connection to 9/11, which is both educating people about 9/11, but it's also educating people about the foundation and carrying forward of goodness. She's able to do that and be one of our ambassadors. She's in a Division I school. She's a great athlete. She's also does well in school. She meets requirements and criteria. We have those posted on our website. And she also has an incredible tie to 9/11. And she now represents the foundation as one of our ambassadors, and it's a beautiful story, and she represents us so well. And I think it's just a beautiful telling, I think, of the 9/11 story, also of the foundation, of the doing of good, and I think it's a great telling of Ray Downey's legacy.
Yeah, it's
and she's just one example. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and you've got example after example after example. But I noticed tonight there's a little special event going on. There's a boxing event or something, NYPD, FD. What's going on here?
It is Saturday night. So Saturday night, on the eve of the 21st anniversary of America's darkest day, First Responders Are Uniting, organized by NYPD Boxing for Kids, Staten Island, where the Ferry Hawks play at Staten Island University Hospital Arena. We are going to have first responders duking it out, and they're doing it on behalf of kids and on behalf of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and it's organized, like I said, by NYPD Boxing, and Pat Russo is the person who has spearheaded all of this for the kids, and I have to tell you, he's just a remarkable man, and it's a remarkable organization that is doing all of this, and they're doing it, like I said, to help kids in troubled areas, and to help kids to raise awareness to law enforcement, to familiarize them with law enforcement. And what happens through this program is kids wind up becoming close with law enforcement officers at a young age, and many wind up becoming part of law enforcement as a result. And in fact, I think all the members of the boxing team right now actually were part of this Kids in Boxing program, and are now part of the team. So it's been a program, I think, that's been around for a few decades, and it's just another example of a beautiful story of everyday heroes, an everyday hero like Pat Russo, who kicked this off and has taken it this far, and now is uniting first responders across all of New York and bringing them together on the eve of America's darkest day to be able to raise more money for Kids in Boxing and to be able to raise money for the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. It's extraordinary. You know, the kindness and the big hearts of people just never ceases to amaze me.
Well, spoiler alert, because every single time I went to one of these matches, us against FD, we kicked butt.
Actually, I think they tell a different story. I don't know, though. No, I'm just kidding.
We kicked their butt.
But it's a great program. I mean, the Kids in Boxing program is just extraordinary. I mean, you hear the reason why it was created and how long it's been around. It's awesome.
Go ahead, Ted. Ted? Did I lose Ted again? Oh, dear Lord, I think I lost my co-host again. There must be a storm going on down in Florida.
No.
Oh, he'll slip back in. Listen, I noticed that Carrie Underwood did a concert, and she donated a portion of her ticket sales to you guys. It was the Denim and Rhinestones tour.
Yes, in fact, the tour kicks off in October, and so every ticket sold, $1 comes to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. So generous, and the tour actually kicks off in October, so people can still buy tickets. It's in over 40 states, so that's something that Carrie Underwood is doing, and we couldn't be more thrilled. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, now you're also doing a lot of other events that people can participate in, such as the 5K run and walk that's coming up on September 25th. Then there's the climbing the stairs that you do. And there's so much good work. So it's not just looking at the first responders. There's so many other things you do, as like helping pay mortgages. Right now you've paid out 22 over 16 states. It's a tremendous amount of good work that the charity does.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a national run, walk, and climb series that has over 80 events a year. So across America, there are over 80 events happening that people can participate in to help remember the heroes of America, heroes of 9/11, heroes in local communities. So that those are events that happen locally, and those are ways that people can really honor people in their local communities. Like you said, the mortgages, we announced that we're paying off 21 mortgages for the 21st anniversary of 9/11. So that's happening. And we tend to do that you'll see us do that for July 4th. You'll see us do that for 9/11. You'll see us do that on Veterans Day, etc. There is always something happening at Tunnel to Towers. And in addition to like the National Run, Walk, and Climb series, we have dozens of golf outings that happen all over America, across cities across the nation. We have that big, like the event that you mentioned in New York City. Our signature event is the event that happens on the last Sunday in September, and that's the New York City 5K run and walk that happens. But where 30,000 people participate, but that's one event. But we have them all over the country, like I said, so people can remember and honor the heroes in their own communities across this nation. So it's really extraordinary. And in addition to our own events, people, superstars like Carrie Underwood and others will donate $1 from ticket sales or recognize us in so many different ways. It's really extraordinary how large the foundation has become, how recognized we are, and just how much we've grown since the foundation started, and really how much people do for us. It's really nice to know that people not only stand up and support heroes, but they know who we are, and they're going to always be here. People leave want us to be part of their legacy, remember us in their wills. We have somebody who left acres of land to us in Land O'Lakes, Florida, and we're building a community of more than about 110 homes, so that our program recipients can live in the first of its kind, a community of our program recipients, so that people can live amongst other people who've gone through the similar tragedies in their lives, so their kids can be raised together, so that through understanding one another, they can help to heal one another. It's really extraordinary. It's the first community of its kind, and we hope it's the first of many.
Well, unless they've stood in the shoes of that first responder or that military person, they couldn't understand. And I'm fortunate that here where I live now in South Carolina, there is a location that, it's a compound, it's also firing range and everything, that you can go and they understand. You don't have to basically say anything. Mm-hmm. They just know. And to feel that you're among people that have experienced the same thing. You know, anyone can talk about, oh, yeah, you watch it on TV and they run into the gunfight. You don't know what it takes to do that. Or you run into a burning building. You don't know what it takes to do that. Most people would run the other way, but we run forward. And it's good to know that there is an area that we can go, and it's almost like a safe space for us. That there's no judgment.
Absolutely.
There's no judgment, but there
None.
is help to heal. And that's really important because
Absolutely.
there's a record number of suicides going on of military personnel as well as first responders, the highest number ever seen. And unless we help these men and women that are still out there serving or have served, then there will be no one left to protect us or to save us.
We have to help them. It's awful. It's terrible what's happening right now. We have to help. And we have to do everything we can to help them.
Now, if people want to get involved, they go to t2t.org, correct?
Absolutely. t2t.org.
All right. And you have on there a calendar that lists different events across the country. So they can go through the calendar and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm outside of Pittsburgh and you're going to be here. Oh, you've got a softball game going on next weekend. There is a 6th annual tournament next weekend. See, I do my homework.
Yeah. You really do. You did a great job. Thank you.
Or if you're in Kentucky,
And he does a great job.
Or if you're in Kentucky and you're going to the state fair, though, you got to never forget mobile going to the Kentucky State Fair on the 28th. And they can go to the calendar and see where they are, or they can even travel to where you are to participate in your events.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The calendar is the best way to check out where we are, what's going on in your area, or where you might want to travel to get involved in an event that's upcoming.
And on your website, if you are a parent of a student or you are that athlete student, you can go onto the website, fill out the application to see if they qualify to become one of the ambassadors, see what is required of them to become one of the ambassadors. They can also go to that website and pick up the curriculum that you put on the 9/11 Institute, or get your books by just filling out the little form, and it's really easy, pain-free. They can make a donation through there. They can see how they can volunteer. It is a one-stop shop for everything there.
It sure is. It sure is. And I just would love to say, too, if I can, I just want to thank everybody for their support. I mean, the support that we get across this country, it never ceases to amaze me. People are so incredibly generous, and we wouldn't be able to do all of the things that we do that are so special without all the support of the people in this great country. The people are so generous and so kind, and they're the only reason we're able to do all of the things that we do. So we would be nothing without all of the people of this country who show their support every minute of every day. So thank you.
No, thank you for looking out for the rest of us. And thank you for all the hard work you guys do. And thank you, Frank, for starting this organization. It wasn't easy, and he took it off the ground, and he hit the road running. And wow.
He sure did.
He sure did.
Yeah. And Sunday is...
He sure did.
Sure did.
Sunday is the 21st anniversary of 9/11. And God bless you and everyone that you work with. I'm telling people, you got to go to Tunnel to Towers Foundation at t2t.org and get involved. Learn more. You know, you don't have to be a kid to get the curriculum book to learn, so get the high school book. You never know. You just might find out that you didn't know about before.
Yeah, and a lot of people, you'd be surprised how many adults tell me how much they learned from my books.
It's about time. It's about time they learned.
It's a good thing. That means they're reading to their children.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's great. A lot of people. I have to tell you, every day I meet people in the night that have their own. There are so many 9/11 stories. I could never learn them all. I learn so much every day just talking to people about their stories. So there are so many stories out there to learn. I could never learn them all. So every day we're all learning, and that's really what's special about all of it. So we should all just keep learning and keep hearing more stories and stay connected. That's what we should all do, and that's what I endeavor to do.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job, Kristie. God bless you for that hard work you do. I mean, I can't even thank
Thank
you
you,
and
and
the
God bless you.
T2T.org enough. Well, amen. Ted, you got anything last?
Thanks so much. Thank you to you and Ted. Thanks so much, Ted.
Can I just add one thing there before you go? And I know you're in a hurry, Annie. Is, we all came together on 9/11, and we stayed together as Americans for a period of time. But over time, things start to evaporate. That feeling goes away, and it comes back on 9/11 again when we celebrate the survivors and that tragic incident that happened to our country, so that we remember those things can happen here. And the affinity groups like the first responders, the policemen, the fire department, so on, those are the ones that hold that together so tight. And then the survivors of the 9/11, and of course the ones that we honor that passed away. It's so important we do that. And again, I just want to commend you for what you did. My daughter was in the Coast Guard up in New York, not when 9/11 happened, but she was up there, and she organized with the Coast Guard to have the largest participation they ever had in the Tunnels to Tower run. And I think they went from 200 to maybe 400 people that ran in that. And it was just a great tribute. And so, again, people like you that are keeping that out there, and we appreciate it.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And thank her for that as well. That's extraordinary. I love it. That's fantastic.
Well, Kristie, it has been a pleasure having you on, and you're welcome to come back anytime. Anything you got new going on, you guys got my number. Just give me a shout, and we'll get you back on.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for keeping the messages out there, for getting the messages out there. Thank you,
Sure.
thank you, thank you. God bless. I really appreciate it.
It's an honor.
Well, if you
likewise.
Take care. Have a great day.
Well, if you run across the
You too.
PBA president, Patty Lynch, just tell him I said hi, because I came out of the same command. He was in my squad.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
Pat's a big friend of ours. Absolutely. Will do.
Well, tell him you said hi to me.
That's fantastic. Oh, absolutely. I will do that. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's terrific. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Check
All
out
right. Bye-bye.
T2T.org, the Tunnels
Goodbye.
to Tower Foundation, T2T.org. Get yourself involved. What a great segment, Ted. What a great segment. Did I lose Ted again?
It really was.
I thought I lost
No,
you
I'm
again.
here. You could tell her passion for what she's doing, and it just exudes over the phone.
Yeah. And she was breaking down in tears. You can hear it when she was talking about the children's books that she writes.
I could tell.
And how she personally went through it. It's her own personal story, a story of her family and her kids. And it's wonderful that she was able to take that and put it to a purpose that could uplift and to teach at the same time.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 10 minutes before our next guest. There's so much to talk about, Ted. And all right, I want you to break down the president's speech he gave recently on the steps of Philadelphia. Holy cow. That would probably take you half an hour, but we'll try to break it down from the backdrop. And I had to replay the tape 3 times as I watched them walk up the steps on that backdrop. It was freaky. I mean, talk about a stage set. And what was it? Was it in, Town Hall wrote an article saying it was reminiscent of the Nuremberg trial setting, where they had the 2 huge flags with the 2 soldiers standing there, and they come up these steps. If anyone watched the trial of Nuremberg, the movie, it was just freaky. I mean, whoever thought that? I don't know. And next thing he calls us Nazis, and you got a Nazi backdrop? Really?
No, I agree with you. And when you looked at him, and it reminded me of Hitler in the plaza, that big arena amphitheater they made, where you saw the millions of people out there. And his rhetoric was the most toxic I have ever heard from a president of the United States in my 67 years. For him to go after, and he's done this before, if you weren't vaccinated, you're the one killing people. If you're not vaccinated, you're spreading the virus. And he would go on, and he keeps doing that over and over again. And then he yelled in there that he was going to get rid of the ARs. He said since then, make no mistake where this guy's coming from. And it's not just him, the Marxist Democratic Party, that they're the Marxists that hide behind the Democratic Party. And you're seeing what they're going to do, the mandates coming out of them. You know, you go back to COVID, you go to the $600 they wanted to investigate in your bank accounts. One of the reasons they got the IRS in there, to get rid of the student loans. What he is doing is dividing this nation between, you know, what he wants to call the MAGA extremists. And those are the people that stand up for God, country, family, the flag, the Constitution. Those are the ones that are fighting to preserve the constitutional republic that we have. The group he's talking to and that's supporting him is the group that wants to bring down the constitutional republic that has been so successful in this world and create a Venezuelan Nicolas Maduro type socialism country. And it will not survive in this country, and we cannot let it. And there's ways that we can fight back on that.
Well, first way we do is at the ballot box this November. And just, we're talking about, 2 months away, not even, where the ballot box is going to be
70-some days.
Really, really important. That's the first step. The second step is to hold those we elect to office, responsible. You don't let it just fly by you. That's what they're hoping, that we'll let stuff just fly by us and not pay attention. It's everything as usual, which is, again, what Fred was writing about in his book. We cannot sit idly by. We need to take the nation back peacefully through the election process, through all the procedural and legal processes we possibly can. Okay. Did I lose Ted again?
No.
Oh, no.
No, I'm here.
I
I had a delay on my thing here.
Oh, all right.
No, it is. And it is something that, and Fred did bring this up, and you brought it up again. And what that is the American people need to wake up. We talked about the austerity measures. I can remember when I was in Congress and Social Security got cut back maybe 1 or 2%. Because it was a COLA decrease, because there was a decrease in inflation, so things went backwards. There was the amount of anger that we had of constituents calling our office saying how this is outrageous, it should never happen. That was 1%. When austerity measures come and they're forced on us because of the ineptness of Congress, and I have to take blame because I was there and I could not do the things I wanted to change. And you start going back 4, 5, 6, 7% in somebody's benefit check, Social Security, Medicare, food stamps. There will be riots in the street we've never seen in this country, and the only way we're going to fix that is by educating the electorate, like you're doing on your program, Annie, and I commend you. The other thing is empower the American people, or remind them of the power they have to do term limits on these bums that have been up there, and they just talk about the rhetoric of what we're going to fix, and we're going to fix this, and Congress, we're going to hold them accountable. They say we're going to hold them accountable every election cycle, yet nobody's held accountable. And people need to wake up, and we need to throw these people out of office. It's not their office, it's our office, we the people. And until we do that, I don't see things getting better in this country, and they'll get worse until a point where people are tired of it.
Well, what we have right now is a family feud in the Republican Party, especially between Mitch McConnell and the National Republican Senatorial Committee Chairman, Rick Scott. I mean, if we're fighting among ourselves and we can't look towards the future saying, let's put the best candidate forward, let's put the one that would get the job done. No, but it's going to be business as usual. We've got to get the establishment
That's my
out.
fear.
Yeah, we've got to get the establishment out.
And you know why they're fighting amongst themselves, right? It's because there is no leadership. We're looking at the next election cycle and how many members do we have to get the majority. What are you going to do once you get the majority? Kevin McCarthy, somebody told me he had a 60 or 90 point plan. And I said, that's too many. At this point in time in our country, that's too many. Give me 5 or 6. Inflation, education, our debt, those kind of things. Energy security. And this is one of the things that Fred brought up, putting back to the states. And I agree. Education, food stamps. I don't want to harp on food stamps, but education, why is that a federal program? It was never supposed to be a federal program. Jimmy Carter brought it in. Ronald Reagan could have gotten rid of it. But he had Bill Bennett, who was a Democrat at the time, told him he could fix it. Well, they didn't. But that should be at a state level, and the federal government should be the overseer, say you need to make sure your kids are at these level, and on a nation level, track everybody to make sure we're progressing and getting better. The Department of Energy is one of those ones that was set up to create an energy policy for the United States of America to be energy independent. It's never happened other than Donald Trump. And so repurpose that department, and until we get people focused in Washington on where America is going to be 25, 30, 50 years from now, there's going to be that infighting because they're all vying for the next position. Somebody wants to be the speaker, the majority leader, the majority whip. And I want somebody to say, I want you to win for America, not for a party.
Now, that's the problem. They're there to keep their seat. And the whole object is as soon as they get elected, they start fundraising every lunch hour, every day off. You're out there making those phone calls to fundraise. No. Just take the money out of it and maybe just represent the people. But that's not possible because of the way our electoral system has been set up.
Well, the way it's evolved over the years. And I mean, my ex-representative who got redistricted, she sent it out the day after the election, after she got elected. We're behind on fundraising. We have to raise more money. And that person does not even have a major Democrat running against her, but she's telling everybody she's behind. And it's sickening is what it is. It's pathetic. And it can be done without doing that and paying alms to the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I hear so many of these members say, they're over at the NRCC, which is a National Republican Congressional Committee, dialing for dollars, raising money for the party. And then they have the altar call on our side in the Republican Party where the members that raise the most are usually not bashful. And so they want recognition by the other members. And so they'll call an altar call once a month. All right, who's got a check for the NRCC? And, they try to outdo each other. I raise 50,000. I raise 100,000. I raise 200,000. And they clap and they celebrate. And I'm like, what are you doing for your district? What are you doing for the nation? You should be spending time there. And so I never did that. I never played that game.
Oh, that's the problem. You don't play the game, you don't get reelected. But wait a minute.
Well, that's what you hear, but we did well. And we got bills passed. We got significant bills passed. And I was on the chairman of a committee, even though I didn't pay my dues. And, I bucked the system, from day one when I voted against Boehner. It's just, there's people that go up there for a job, and we need to hire and elect people that want to go up for a cause. And we need to make sure that cause is preserving our constitutional republic like it has been handed to us so that we can pass it on for generations to come. And if they don't have that in their heart, throw them out.
Well, hopefully we can do that in this election cycle. It's a little too late for me to get rid of Lindsey Graham, or as I call him, Lamesy Graham. But once in a while, he does get things right. I have to admit, once in a while.
He does.
Not often, but once in a while. We'll give him that. But we.
He's one that likes to talk a lot about what they're doing. You remember? He was the Attorney General. What was his name from Alabama? Jeff. Was it
Jeff
somebody?
Sessions?
Yeah. I was in a meeting, I was new, and we were talking about immigration, and he was saying, is this all right to say on your show?
Well, listen, we've got our next guest in. I want to welcome to the show from the Heritage
Well,
Foundation.
if they're here, I won't say it.
From the Heritage, I cut you off pretty quick, didn't I? Sarah Parshall.
You sure did, and feel free to do that.
I'll get the name out. Sarah Parshall Perry. She's from the Heritage Foundation. She's the Senior Legal Fellow for the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Sarah, my guest co-host today is the one, the only, the infamous former congressman from the great Sunshine State of Florida, Ted Yoho. So we're in good company here today.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Sarah, great to hear you.
Yes, Sarah, it is. I have to say, because when I said, Tom, you sending me someone, and he said he was sending me you, and I said, perfect, because I pulled your article up. And the last time you were on, we were talking about school choice and religious discrimination, the Carson versus Macon case.
Yes.
And we were discussing what the possible outcome was. And I'm surprised everything you and I talked about and everything you pointed out is just hit it spot on. Wow. We got something right.
Well, I tell you what, it's certainly back in the news now. What we're hearing based on this unprecedented ruling from this New York State Supreme Court judge is something that should be pretty easily overturned based on what the Supreme Court just determined in Carson v. Macon, which, as you know, was one of the last of the entire term. It was one of the big cases. It was religious liberty. It was education. And again, this was kind of a blockbuster docket for the court on this past few months. I think the second term was something that we're not entirely likely to see again, at least from that perspective of sort of breadth and depth of socially I would say hot button issues, particularly so in light of what we just heard from Fox today about the Dobbs leak potentially being identified in the next coming weeks, according to Justice Gorsuch. But this particular case, Annie, is one that we were talking about earlier in our legal center, and it centers on a particular decision that determines that Yeshiva University, which is the flagship Jewish Orthodox university in the nation, has just been determined by a state Supreme Court judge not to be entitled to a religious exemption to anti-discrimination law. So we're not in this case talking about federal laws like Title VII or Title IX, which do exempt religious individuals or religious organizations. This is New York's human rights law. So that's important here because it says explicitly that if an organization organizes under, for example, New York's education law, and it creates a charter that is secular as opposed to religious in nature, which, for example, a church or a synagogue might do, then it's not entitled to a religious exemption, even if it happens to be providing religious instruction. Now, that's quite a stretch on the part of the New York State Supreme Court because, as you mentioned at the beginning, Annie, we just learned in Carson v. Macon that the Supreme Court doesn't care about any distinction between religious status for an organization and the religious use to which public money might be put, for example, for religious instruction. But it seems as though this particular Supreme Court is going to find a way and has found a way to thread the needle and force an Orthodox Jewish university that keeps all Jewish traditions, requires classes in Hebrew, requires all of the observations of Jewish holidays, requires classes that are directed specifically for a deeper understanding of Judaism, that they will be subjected to a violation of New York human rights law unless they recognize an LGBT student group on campus. So Yeshiva has filed what's called an emergency application to the Supreme Court, and it's desperate for help. It's requested an injunction to pause this decision from the state Supreme Court, or in the alternative, to take up the entire case on the merits on what's called a petition for review or petition for certiorari. We're actually hoping that the latter is the choice, that the entire justices will decide that this is a case worthy of further clarification, and that this, in the end, ultimately presents an impermissible burden on this organization's religious freedom.
Man, they'll find any way to twist everything around to fit the narrative they have. They create.
There's no question.
They create the solution to where there is no problem, which is there should be no problem.
That's exactly it. It should be no problem at all. And for a religious organization like Yeshiva University, they organize under an educational charter. So New York has an education law under which they organize because, of course, they are a 4-year institution, higher education institution. And because of that particular law, they are not subject, according to the New York State Supreme Court, they're not subject to religious liberty protections because they said, well, you've organized under a secular charter and you offer secular degrees, whether that's history or philosophy or math. And because of that, the opinion that came down in this case determined that they were not religious enough, that they hadn't followed the proper organizational structure. So regardless of what they taught, regardless of how religious they thought they were, and regardless of the fact, and this is a big distinction, that they were making a religious decision, which all of the parties, including the Gay Pride Alliance, agreed was a religious decision. Despite all that, they're not going to be protected from anti-discrimination law.
What happened to the part of the First Amendment where it says, nor prohibit the free expression thereof?
That's a great question. And I will tell you this, this Supreme Court, in balancing, as you know, the two religion clauses of the First Amendment, one is the free exercise clause and one is the establishment clause. And the two of them have to work in concert with one another. We don't want the government to establish a religion. That is, in fact, what the foundling nation was actually fleeing when it came to the United States, the freedom to be able to worship as they wanted and to leave a state-sponsored religion. But we want people to exercise those individual beliefs, those precepts, to the greatest extent possible, as long as it doesn't force the government to recognize and approve of it. And here, this is so simply, I think, a determination of what the Supreme Court already held in Carson, but also what we know they've said about religious liberty specifically within the context of education. Because remember, we also saw another religious liberty and education case in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, the case of the coach who took a knee to pray at the 50-yard line. And again, they have said in the balance between free exercise and establishment worries, we really want to make sure the balance is tipped in favor of free exercise. And between the three of us on this call, it is predominantly because they want to avoid what I think we are precipitously close to, and that's an authoritarianism when it comes to governments in private, personal life. I think we're headed in that direction now.
Well, I'm going to switch a little bit here because there's another case you wrote about recently, and that's Williams v. Kincaid. This was coming out of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, they had to twist themselves worse than playing a game of Twister. I mean, they had to go convoluted. I mean, I was reading this, I'm going, how the heck do you come to this conclusion? But they did. That if you have a gender dysphoria, you seem to feel that you're in the wrong body, that falls underneath the American with Disabilities Act. That they should be given public accommodations. Well, public accommodations means if I walk out on the sidewalk and I call he a she when it's actually a she being a he, or whatever it is, I'm in trouble.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example of how that plays out in real time, Annie. We're looking at now future accommodations for all places of public service. And obviously, there are multitudes, goods and services provided, openly accessible to the public. Think of movie theaters, restaurants, small businesses,
Bakeries.
large businesses, government buildings, bakeries, of course. We've seen the wedding vendor cases, all of which fall under the umbrella of public accommodations. They are also subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act, the federal civil rights law that says if you receive so much as $1 of federal funding, you must make accommodations to individuals who possess one of a various number of handicaps. And that means most likely what we're going to start seeing, if this precedent holds, we're going to start seeing bathrooms, for example, opened up to individuals who feel themselves to be one way, even though biologically they are the other way. Think of what Target did with its bathrooms and was 5 years ago apparently ahead of the jurisprudential curve on this. But this particular decision coming from Judge Diana Motz, who's in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it was a split panel, it was a divided panel, it was 2-1. And I will say that the dissenting judge wrote really a brilliant dissent. But here's how she figured out how to cram this in. And this is the first decision we've ever seen in 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is the first time we've seen it, but here's how she found the loophole. The ADA explicitly excludes, in its own terminology, gender identity disorders. Now, if I hear gender identity disorder, I, of course, think gender dysphoria, flip sides of the same coin. Naturally, if you have a gender identity disorder, you have dysphoria about the gender, the biological sex with which you are born. However, she took a little bit of history and ran pell-mell with it, determining that at the time of the ADA's passage, there was no gender dysphoria because we only had gender identity disorder. They would exclude that. But now, because the DSM has been altered, because as you know, the sciences are subject to wokeism as much as the liberal arts and letters are subject to wokeism, as much as movies and government and politics are. The DSM, written by psychologists, yes, absolutely. They've all changed it. Gender dysphoria is now recognized as a separate condition. She said, well, because it didn't exist at the time, now we're going to include it in the ADA. So my guess is that once we see a different outcome in another circuit, and the Fourth Circuit used to be a very sort of conservative, originalist circuit. I argued once in front of the former chief judge there, and this has become a completely different ball of wax with this particular makeup on this panel. But once we see a differing opinion, say out of the Sixth Circuit or the Fifth Circuit, from which we've seen really good opinions in the past 2 to 3 years, then I'm thinking it's most likely headed to the Supreme Court, where they have had to time and again look back at a federal statute and say, what did Congress intend at the time? It had the opportunity to amend it. It didn't amend it. And therefore, we won't read into it some kind of an inclusion that was never there in the first place. I think that's what we're going to see here.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how she figures out of the blue, in the millennias of human existence, that suddenly, just suddenly overnight, gender dysphoria just popped up out of nowhere. It never existed ever before. Right?
Correct.
I'm just trying to figure that one out. Ted, can you figure that one out?
Well, you know, there's so many of those topics, they just kind of pop up. I still remember hearing America is wrought with systemic racism after a little incident I had with my colleague from New York. Steny Hoyer said that. And I'm like, I've never heard that term used that way. Gender dysphoria, no. Yeah, I mean, that came up. And it goes back to who's pushing this narrative. And it's the Marxist Democrats that are pushing this narrative for division, divide and conquer.
That's exactly it. I've been doing a lot of sort of deep thinking in my small cubicle in Washington, D.C. about exactly why the progressives and the modern day Marxists are ultimately winning the war of language. And I had a colleague say to me, who's also an attorney, that we need to be calling things what they are. And in this particular case, we are recognizing something that is utterly made up. The gender dysphoria diagnosis didn't exist.
Made up, absolutely.
It is absolutely made up. And to say that it is different from gender identity disorder, which is having your cake and eating it too, there is no one on planet Earth who's read this opinion who wants to be a different sex other than they've been born, that's going to say they have gender identity disorder. They'll now call themselves gender dysphoric because that, of course, provides them accommodations under civil rights law. And that, I think, is just an untenable conclusion.
And the consequences...
Well, did you follow...
Go ahead, Kate. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Amy.
No, I just said, go ahead.
Sarah, did you follow that Dr. Brittany Cooper, the professor out of Rutgers, with the stuff she said about white people need to be taken out, their birth rates are low, and that's good, we need to get rid of them?
It does not surprise me in the least, Ted. I have to tell you, what we're hearing from all the sectors of the critical race theorists and the critical gender theorists they're just flip sides of the same coin, because of course we do know it's Marxism, and I've been studying a little history lately and trying to discern exactly what the origins are and why the popularity has increased so much. And it really began with Gramsci back at the turn of the early 20th century.
Exactly.
Went
That's
through the
exactly
Marx
right.
school. And I have to tell you, I think the fact that we're lapping it up without having done our history just indicates, among many, many other things, that our public education system is failing. And I say this as a mother of 3 public education students, 2 of whom need accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act for their autism. So let me tell you why Williams versus Kincaid rubs me particularly the wrong way, because my sons who are in public education who need individual benefits, and they need individual curricular assistances and program lifts to get through what is ordinarily much harder for them because of the way they're wired neurologically. This, for me, is an opinion that's beyond the pale, because these are individuals who ultimately don't feel very good about their biological sex, whereas my 2 sons were born precisely, by the way, as God wanted them to be born. They are wonderful young men, but they require accommodations. Just so to say that now we're looking at bathrooms opened up to an individual's gender identity, because, of course, under the ADA, it's required, I think really is a dark day looming on the American political horizon.
It really is. And you know, that whole thing about, I think Annie was bringing it up, about they control the narrative. And I want to go back to this Professor Cooper. She said, I watched the podcast. She goes, we need to take the white people out. You know, we need to kill them, those MRFers, is what she said. And then this school caucus, it is the Black Indigenous People of Color Faculty Caucus at Rutgers. Says critical, the aims of censorship, these people that are against her are critical race theory and the teachings of race theory. Racism they're threatened to silence conversation about the history of white supremacy and its current manifestation. Now, if we go back to the Jim Crow laws, the KKK and all that, those are all Democrats. I mean, all that stuff was Democrats. And Joe Biden in his speech said the Republicans want to bring back Jim Crow laws. Well, I believe it was the Republicans back in the 1800s with the Civil War that got rid of that stuff and fought for, you know, everything that the African American race, the past slaves, achieved was because they fought against the Democrats and beat that. But that narrative, the Democrats own it, like they're the ones that did it, did all these good things, but yet they're the ones that did all the bad things, and they continue that narrative today. And the media is behind them, and Hollywood is behind them, 100%.
No, Sarah,
and it's time we've got to wake up. We don't have a lot of time.
Well, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong. It was the Republicans in 1865 that put forth the first civil rights legislation. It was the Democrats in 1898 that overturned it.
Yes.
So, and then it was the Republicans that brought it back in the 1950s, and LBJ was the one that kept on killing it.
Republicans and conservatives that were the first abolitionists, many of whom were Christians of their own right and saw the inherent worth of every human being.
Yeah, James Garfield was an adamant abolitionist. I mean, he abhorred slavery, as a lot of the Republicans did. And, the Democrats are saying we're the racist one. No, we're protecting the Constitution that has allowed for so many good things to happen to all races, including the white race even.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think what we're seeing now is just the turning of all of that goodwill upside down. And now we're creating within civil rights law, whose purpose was equality, not equity, which is different. That's an unconstitutional principle that violates the 14th Amendment. But equality, a level ground for all human beings with recognition of all human beings' worth and value.
Well, Sarah, it has been such a pleasure to have you. We're down to our last 4 minutes of the show. And I love you to come back on as much as you'd like. Just tap Tom on the shoulder and say, come on, I got stuff to talk about.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great weekend, Annie and Tom.
All right, you too. God bless.
And Sarah, you and the Heritage Foundation do a great job, and keep it up.
Well, people can find her and other great people over at heritage.org. Ted, that's all we got for today. We do have for next week, I've got a new author, McDonald, who wrote about first responders. He's got a great book out. He'll be joining us. Andrew Diskey from Open the Books should be coming back on also. Plus, we got Mark Tapscott from the Epic Times, and also Hill Faith, and another great guest from Heritage. So we're booking pretty fast already, and we're gonna have a great.
You're
time.
Doing a great job, Annie, and I know you and Curtis will do well. And I know you probably have gotten Curtis's book, Truth versus the Democrat Party. He outlines that very well. That argument. It is a good book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining us. And, you're welcome to pop in whenever you want. We're always here on Fridays.
I appreciate it. You take care. And we'll be gone for 2.5 weeks in Vietnam. Leave Tuesday.
Oh, travel safe then. God bless. May God go with you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So that's all we got. We're going to leave the show with the song from my friend Gary Pecorella, Save America. So until then, good night. God bless.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. More for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe God we trust.
90 seconds.
Cradle my forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me.
60 seconds.
Behind time their nights. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I'm here at the cross. For the friends I have loved and lost, and I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America.
10 seconds